Now Recording in progress.
Welcome, everybody. Excuse me, particularly the National Treasury team, and there might be stakeholders present who made representations on the bill. They're welcome too, although this is now in committee stage. So let's start with any apologies in Kulileko.
Good morning, Chairperson. On the side of members of the committee, I do not have any apology. From the MPLs is Honorable Manning from Northern Cape, who has tendered an apology. That's it, Chairperson.
The others are here.
Yeah, I assume, Chairperson.
Are the others? Then I must welcome especially the chairpersons of the provinces, and to remind them that next Tuesday, we have to process negotiating mandates from you, and then see where the process goes. Now, because 7, I think, of the 9 provinces have already submitted negotiating mandates, and the National Treasury team has been given those representations. They had public hearings and the like, from what I can gather. Now, I should also mention, I spoke with National Treasury yesterday and this morning, and suggested to them that there's a lot of work to be done, and maybe they need to buttress the team, and I discovered from Willie that he's also got 2 other lawyers. They don't appear before the committee, but they are there observing everything we do. And MP says she has 2 other people as well. So it's not just the 2 of them. There's at least 3 on each side, so that's 6 of them, which is a relief. Secondly, we have got a letter, as you know, from several stakeholders, most of whom I think were here. Some were not in our public hearings, but it doesn't matter. They have a right to write to us. We've asked Frank to look at it, as have we all. We got it on Friday afternoon. Well, I got it late Friday morning, just before our meeting, and only reread it properly afterwards. I just browsed through it. And we will obviously reply to them hopefully within the 10 days. But we will discuss the response, starting with the legal issues that arise and any other relevant issues from Frank. Now, what I'm suggesting, colleagues, we did send you an agenda. Firstly, I think we should start with Frank taking us through the key issues that he wants to, as he needs to, on the constitutional issues. There's once again a request in that letter for a full-day workshop and so on. I have already indicated from the point of view of a chair the limits and possibilities of that, and how Parliament operates in terms of dealing with constitutional issues. It's not a subjective decision of MPs to vote on. It's advice from legal experts, usually from the legal services unit, but sometimes we also bring in outsiders where we need to. So I suggest we start with Frank in response to the constitutional issues that we've discussed with the stakeholders in the public hearings, and then the response from National Treasury to public hearings, and then subsequently last week in dealing with the report on the exchanges between Treasury and the stakeholders. So he's been here all the time, and he's our permanent legal advisor, which we're lucky to have. So I'll hand over to him. Thereafter, we come back to the issue of looking at what is the extent of Black economic empowerment? What are the statistics showing? And Treasury will just take us quickly through their document, which they gave us some 2 or more weeks ago. And then Poppy Ntaka from our unit will reply from Parliament side. She did a paper in response to that, which we sent out to you yesterday. Thereafter, I suggest we start looking at the policy issues. We're not looking at textual analysis right now. That only comes after we mandate Treasury on what changes they should make, and we've done none yet. We've gone through the process of hearing Treasury and the stakeholders, hearing Treasury again and the stakeholders, hearing Treasury again and the stakeholders. Now it's for us looking at what both have to say to decide as a parliamentary committee, NCOP committee, dealing with the Section 76 bill, what is it that we think should be done? And this is the main thrust from henceforth, only at the policy level. We'll go through the bill line by line, and they will begin to draft amendments as we begin to shape the policy views that we have. Right, so let's see how far we get. Is there anybody else who will suggest a better process? I can't think of it. It's a straightforward process. We might spill over from one issue to another and so on, but that is the broad approach today. Not hard and fast about it, but that's the approach. Does anybody have a view apart from what I've just said? No. The provincial chairs who are here, please feel free to speak, right? Right, let's go ahead to Frank. Are you here, right?
I'm your chairperson. Good morning.
Right. Go ahead on the 2 issues. Firstly, the constitutional issues, and then secondly, the letter from those colleagues of ours from the civil society. Thanks.
Thank you, chairperson. Good morning. Good morning, honorable members and colleagues and visitors on the platform. Chairperson, I'm fortunate enough that there's obviously a lot of overlap between the letter and the constitutional issues. The one speaks to the other, or at least the letter speaks to the constitutional issues. So I will deal with them almost concurrently, chairperson. And I just noted some issues. I'm going to start with the one which is, of course, closest to my area of work in Parliament, which is public participation. Now, the public participation is highlighted in the letter. There's concerns about various aspects of public participation in that. These concerns are the process within the National Assembly, where National Treasury did not, and I want to say this, specifically respond to each and every submission that was made. And then in the NCOP, there's a request for a workshop. There's a issue of time, not enough time to make the submissions, etc., chairperson. So, Chair, as I understand the process with National Treasury and the National Assembly, as well as what happened in the NCOP, because the two processes are distinct, but they are also connected in a way. I've spoken to Treasury, and what I've been advised is that they have looked, or at least accommodated, all the issues of all the responses that were received, although they did not have time to specifically address each and every one of them, but the issues were taken up and considered. And this I want to also say has happened in an open committee. So the process was continued within the NCOP, where we are today, Chairperson, and we know how the participation worked. I want to go to the letter, Chair, and the letter actually says it much better than I have. The letter indicates that they have engaged actively in the preparation of the public procurement bill, and then sets out also the level of participation that was done in the NCOP and the National Assembly. Now, Chair, the test whether this will pass the constitutional challenge, those tests has been highlighted in, I think the first case was Doctors for Life. There were other cases that led up to Doctors for Life. I'm not going to quote all the cases, but basically what is required is Parliament must act reasonably. So to act reasonably, Parliament must create opportunities, reasonable opportunities for persons to participate meaningfully or effectively in Parliament, to the point where they are able to influence decisions of the committee, and then eventually will lead to affecting the decision of the National Assembly or the National Council of Provinces. Now, Chair, this test has then been applied a few times, and in Doctors for Life, for instance, Parliament was found to have failed the test simply because we did not reach out enough to the electorate or the people of South Africa. There were insufficient time given to people to make submissions. There were insufficient time given to people to attend meetings. There were no transport to meetings. There were no translations in place, and people could not understand. Maybe it would also be useful to see that the court look at it from a lens of two perspectives. One is, was there a meaningful opportunity created? And that would entail, how could people get to the venue? Did they have advance notice of the venue? And then the second issue is, were they able to participate effectively? In that part, the court looks at things looks at issues such as translation of legislation. Was it in a language that the people of the area could understand? Were there some kind of empowerment or some informative notices given to people so they can understand the gist or the purpose of the legislation rather than just the technicalities of it? And then were they given the opportunity to participate? So, Chair, on those score, there's a few court decisions that went against Parliament. Under this specific area, I've mentioned Doctors for Life, and there was the Mohale judgment that dealt with the National House of Tradition and Khoisan Leaders legislation. So, Chair, the other area where we can then also slip up with public participation or fall foul of the constitutional test is where Parliament gives zero opportunity to people to participate. Those instances, I've known of two instances. One was the South African Veterinary Association judgment, where it was drugs and controlled substances amendment law or amendment bill, Chair, where veterinarians were suddenly brought under the scope of the legislation, and it wasn't there before. So the Veterinarian Association never had an opportunity to comment on that specific amendment, and that made the amendment unconstitutional. And similar, there was a case, Chair, a very recent case, I think it could have been last year. I think that's called the South African Iron and Steel. Let me just get it straight. South African Iron and Steel Institute, this is the speaker and the chairperson. That was in 2022. And there again, there were certain amendments made at the last minute, which there was no opportunity given to participate. So that falls foul of the constitutional test. So, Chair, I think between these examples I've used, I was looking at whether we are on the verge of falling foul of our constitutional test for public participation in relation to the Public Procurement Bill, Chairperson. As we all know, the process is still ongoing. Amendments made at this level will go back to the National Assembly, and possibly there will be another opportunity or not, I don't know, depending on exactly what amendments are then adopted or not. So, Chair, I do not think that language or notice of this bill or opportunity given to people to comment falls within any of the categories that I'm aware of that will cause this exercise of public participation at this point to fall foul of a constitutional test, Chairperson. I don't want to use too much of my time on this first point, so I'm going to leave it there. Perhaps there might be a question or two. But as I say, Chairperson, I think what we have in front of me, in terms of public participation, we have a interested group that are very much empowered to deal with this. In any event, I've learned a lot from the exercise. And secondly, opportunity was given for them to participate effectively. Chair, maybe just a word on the issue that's highlighted in the letter, which says that the interaction has been between National Treasury and the stakeholders. Now, Chair, this is happening in an open committee, so you cannot exclude the members. It is the system, it is the process which a committee is empowered to follow. A committee is empowered in terms of our rules to follow its own process to look at legislation and to give effect to a house, because the house refers the legislation to the committee and say, consider this and report. How you do it is your business. Of course, the rules set out the issues of public involvement, and if there are certain changes which is outside the scope of the bill, we have to go back to the House and so forth. So, Chair, in dealing with the mandate coming from the House to consider this bill, the committee could decide on its own procedure. And the committee has decided on a procedure where it, at the initial stage, this is how I'm seeing the procedure adopted by yourself and the committee, is at this initial stage, we have the engagement between the stakeholders and National Treasury, and the members are very much aware of this, and the members can, of course, anytime be approached by stakeholders or Treasury to ask them their view, but it is not as if there's an exclusion, and it's not as if this is happening outside the realm of public participation, which the committee is in charge of. So I think that part needs to just to be understood and looked at from a different perspective, rather than we do not know what the opinion of the members are. The opinion of members can be approached, and in any event, Chairperson, the issue of preferential procurement and Black economic empowerment is everything but new. It's ingrained in the Constitution. And people have been dealing with this matter ever since I can remember, Chairperson, ever since I started studying law in any event, and through my whole career at Parliament, which is now getting to the second decade already. So, Chair, I do not think those obvious pitfalls for public participation is relevant or is applicable, or not so relevant, applicable to what we are doing here today. So, Chair, that's the first constitutional issue I wanted to deal with. The second one, Chair, is Chapter 4. There's two areas of Chapter 4 I want to say something on. One is first the constitutional attack on it. That is, it is vague. It does not give effect to Section 217 of the Constitution. It doesn't embody or explain the constitutional principles. Chair, and then there was also the issue of whether Chapter 4, read with the bill, gives enough clarity about who must initiate the process of developing the policy and then implementing it, because as it is at the moment, it speaks of implementation. Chair, the way I see it is that Chapter 4 must be obviously read in context of the bill, and then within context of other legislation that's already on the statute book, as well as the Constitution, which means the constitutional principles in Section 217 will continue to apply. And everything in this bill will be tested against those. Your policy that will flow from Chapter 4, because as it is at the moment, Chapter 4 should be read in conjunction with, for constitutional institutions and government departments, Section 38 of the Public Finance Management Act. Section 38 of the Public Finance Management Act is preemptive to accounting officers of government departments and constitutional institutions to ensure that there is a system of procurement, and it maintains that system of procurement that complies both with the constitutional principles as well as with the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. So in the case of Parliament, we have the Financial Management of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act. And that act empowers the accounting officer of Parliament to prepare regulations, and these regulations must then be issued by the executive authority of Parliament, which is the Speaker and the Chairperson. So it's a slightly bit different to government departments and the PFMA. Parliament, I think, and it might be my confirmation bias glasses that I have on, Chair, but in terms of our policy, we must prescribe that in regulations, and there's a requirement in the law to have public involvement with the policy that we will put into regulations. So, Chair, whereas the complaint is Chapter 4 doesn't provide clearly who must start the process of developing a policy, when we read it in the context of the PFMA and the Financial Management of Parliament, it becomes clearer. And I believe that the National Treasury will, or I've been advised that National Treasury is working on new language to clear that up, to make sure where the initiation of the policy will start. So, Chair, that is Chapter 4, insofar as it pertains to vagueness, insofar as it pertains to where do we start with it, who must initiate the policy. Chair, I want to say something about Chapter 4, which I also mentioned last time, and that is that Chapter 4 is critically important for an institution like Parliament as well as the provincial legislatures. This bill is repealing the whole of the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. So that framework that the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act gave to Parliament to draft its own procurement policy is going to fall away. And we need another framework that is contained in national legislation as prescribed by Section 217, subsection 3 of the Constitution. We need that. So if it is not this Chapter 4, however it's amended, that will apply to Parliament and provincial legislatures, if it doesn't happen there, then Parliament will have to amend its own Financial Management Act to create that legislative policy, legislative framework for the policy to flow for, because that's how I understand the architecture of Section 217. We need Section 217, then we need a legislative framework, and then the policy will flow from it. That legislative framework, that's at the moment the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework, but it's going to be this bill. Let's hope Parliament stays in it, but that legislative framework can of course be tight or loose, as said in the legal opinion that National Treasury procured, that was written by the Stephen Butler, the senior counsel. That would be the junior Butler of a senior counsel to me. His dad is more senior than him, Chair. Okay, so Chair, that's a critical important point, because we need that legislative framework that Section 2173 requires. So that's Chapter 4 for Parliament, and it will be the whole piece of legislation for government departments and constitutional institutions. Chair, I want to move on from that Chapter 4 issue, and I spoke also a bit about who must initiate the policy and whether there's clarity on that. Chair, that was another issue raised in the letter. As I said, I spoke to National Treasury this morning, and the issue that's coming out there is, of course, there are going to be amendments to Chapter 4 as well as the bill that will be made or that will be proposed for the committee to adopt or not to adopt. Now, there's some issue within the letter that's saying they want to see the final text. Chair, of course, there's no problem with that. We do not want a situation, as I mentioned, as in the South African Veterinarians Association or the Steelworks case, where the final text of legislation is only seen by stakeholders at the last moment, and they said, but we've never had any sight of that specific provision. So we certainly, Chair, that there should be a text that the committee can look at on a line-by-line basis, as well as stakeholders can look at it and say, well, okay, we see where we were taken up and where we weren't taken up, but we know what's the final text of the bill. So I think that's a fair issue to ask of the stakeholders in that letter, Chair. Chair, I want to move on from that part now. The issue of regulations is also coming forward, Chair, where the stakeholders are saying so much is left to regulations that we can't actually ascertain whether the bill is constitutional or not because we don't see the regulations. Now, Chair, the bill, as it is, of course, will be tested against the benchmark, which is the Constitution, specifically Section 217, but Section 7, Section 9, Section 36, and Section 195 of the Constitution will all be relevant for the purpose of testing the constitutionality of this bill. The regulations flow from that, and the regulations, first and foremost, as said in the Agribusiness case, will have to comply with the empowering provisions and the bill and the act at that stage itself. So, Chair, whether the regulations are ready for stakeholders to look at or not, I believe is a matter for National Treasury to deal with. But as I understand the empowerment provisions in this bill, there will be public consultations prior to finalizing it, and Parliament will get an opportunity to scrutinize the regulations, which may or may not also entail further consultation or public participation. There should be some form of public participation in any event, Chair, because that is the constitutional requirement for Parliament's procedures. So Chair, the issue of the regulations not being there at this point in time, I do not think, in my professional opinion, can be said to place a doubt on the constitutionality of the legislation of the bill before us. I think the regulations should be seen as separate, Chair. Chair, there's the issue of financial implications. As I understand it, the memorandum of the bill simply say that there's no substantial financial implications for the state. No substantial financial implications for the state are envisaged. It's not paragraph 5 of the bill, Chair. But we see that there are issues of specifically the tribunal that must be established, and there's a social economic impact assessment that speaks of certain financial or economic consequences of this legislation. First and foremost, Chair, it's an issue, a very important issue, because it goes to the implementation of the Act, whether there's a budget for implementation. But it is a bit of a chicken and egg situation. But first and foremost, one must say that the memorandum, and whether there are correctly indicated financial implications or not, or whether the estimates are correct, in my view, is not going to affect the constitutionality of the legislation. The constitutionality will be tested against the Constitution. The issue of legislation, Chair, the way I understand it, is that luckily this will replace other legislation. But usually when we come with new legislation, it falls upon a department to implement it, and that department must set it out within their strategic plan as well as their annual performance plan, and that gets translated into a budget request to National Treasury. So Chair, the issue of finance is not a simple thing to say, well, we don't know what it's going to cost, so at this point it's unconstitutional. I disagree with that view, Chair. As I say, it's a process, and certainly without money, the bill will not go anywhere. So, well, at least the tribunal part, but the bill can be implemented on a section by section, as I understand it. Different provisions of this Act may be brought into operation on different dates. So one can deal with it like that, Chair. I don't see that as a constitutional problem, the financial issues. Chair, I've spoken about the engagement question between National Treasury stakeholders and the committee. As I said, Chapter 4, Chair, is important for Parliament, and that specific one applies to Parliament, the provincial legislatures, I find constitutionally correct. I think, Chair, this is more or less my sum total of input. I do not see any other critical thing that I want to deal with here, Chair. Maybe just the issue of this workshop and NEDLAC to have further discussions there, Chair. I mean, it's where I'm sitting in my work as a Parliament. I deal with the process. I'm part of the process. I'm in the value chain, much like the committee and members of the committee. So at this point, there's a mandate for the committee from the House, and I'm assisting with that. I think the issue of going back to NEDLAC, going back to workshopping, that goes into the whole preparation of the bill, and maybe that would be an amendment to this legislation. I think, Chair, the issue of procurement, and I'm going to end with this, and that's what I wanted to say. That's about Section 195 of the Constitution, Chair. The issue of procurement, and it's highlighted in the letter, it's very important for the development of South Africa. And there's a whole list of new issues, if I can call it that, that's now in the Chapter 4, which are so-called set-asides and what can be done or cannot be done. Now, from my point of view, Section 195, first of all, compels me to think in a development-orientated manner. If I didn't do that, I have to do that. But for me, at least, I think it's straightforward. So, Chair, development, sustainability, longevity, we want to leave clean water, food, economic prosperity for our children and their children and their children, in a nutcase. In a nutshell, sorry, Chair, in a nutshell. So, Chair, those issues must be taken into account. From that principle, when we look at set-asides for different people, then a set-aside, obviously, and I think it's nicely articulated in the legal opinion from Advocate Butler that National Treasury provided to the committee. It can be said, we have Section 7 and Section 9 that deals with the implementation of specifically the right to equality, and it's a substantive perspective on the right to equality, meaning that there can be redistributive action to correct the imbalances of the past. So therefore, set-asides to deal with the imbalances of the past is not a limitation on anybody's right, and we do not have to look at Section 36 of the Constitution, which is the limitation clause. When we are dealing with set-asides for youth and so forth, other things, specific issues, specific products that must be manufactured in South Africa, those will have to go, if it's challenged, of course, we'll have to show that government has a legitimate governmental objective to deal with that. It's a low threshold. There needs to be a rational connection between the measure applied and the goal that needs to be achieved. So in this instance, for instance, we're speaking of development of South Africa, we're thinking of economic prosperity, etc., etc. So that needs to be shown, but it is certainly not against the Constitution to have set-asides that go beyond the issue of redistributive action, Chair. It's just another test that we will have to apply looking at Section 36. Of course, it can't have the effect of going against redistributive or affirmative action, because that will be against the Constitution, Chair. So I think for now, let me leave it at that, Chair. Thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Advocate Jenkins, for quite a comprehensive and helpful reply. So can we get responses? Many of the issues that Advocate Jenkins has raised are in the narrative report that we sent you another copy of last night on the exchanges between stakeholders and Treasury. They took us through it last week, but obviously we didn't have enough time. So from my side as a chair, which is my response, I've read every line up till at least page 20, 21. We won't go beyond there out of 36. I want to also apologize to the committee. I have an issue beyond my control. I updated my computer with the software. It's a MacBook, but the problem is I use Microsoft. And it started this buffering process. So like, to type something, you got to wait for up to 30 seconds for the next word and so on. It's bizarre. So IT at Parliament tried to help me. It got sorted out. It started again 20 minutes before this meeting. So I'm battling, and my notes are going to be slightly inadequate, but I shall also listen to this again. But I got the full drift of what you were saying. I just need notes. And unfortunately, that's been slowed down. Okay, having said that, I want to suggest that firstly, we respond in general terms, right, to some of the issues. And then we look at the specific policy issues as the item following the next item. Can we have now comments on what the advocate has said in general? Are there any comments?
From stakeholders or from members, Chair?
No, stakeholders are done. As I said, it closed last week. They can write to us, but this is not a public hearing. We've had that, and we got responses, and then we had it last week. We're doing what we normally do in the committee, the same process. It applies to every bill, it'll apply to this bill. There'll be more consultation on this bill and other bills, given its scope. But this is a process we've been following since 2014, well, since 1998 in my case. Okay, Mr. Jatoy.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and thank you, Advocate Jenkins, for your feedback. You're always thorough in what you do. Chair, I just want to focus on one thing, and that is the affirmative action. I hear what Advocate Jenkins is saying, but I want to know, is there any criteria according to which it can be measured? When will we be able to determine that these so-called injustices of the past has been addressed sufficiently? When will the sunset clause be implemented? Because it's common knowledge that it is as a result of the current government that all people are being left behind. And I mean, it is a proven fact that affirmative action legislation and broad-based Black economic empowerment legislation is only beneficial to a certain elite few. Well, I know what is written in the Constitution, but it's my personal view that going on with this will not get the preferred outcome. And if the advocate can maybe advise us if there's anything according to which or against which it can be measured, and is there a sunset clause? When can we expect the BEE and affirmative action to be removed from the Constitution for everyone to have equal opportunities in South Africa and to take part on an equal basis in South Africa, because it is not only a certain segment of the society that is currently experiencing poverty and hunger, but throughout all ethnic groups in the country, people experience that, and it's just unfair, and it's discriminatory to only advance a few, and we know that it's mostly the elite politicians and their connections that benefit from this legislation. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Fani. Anybody else? Dennis?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And yeah, thanks very much to Advocate Jenkins, as always. We seldom agree entirely, but that's the point of the law, isn't it? So yeah, I must note, Chair, that unfortunately I didn't get this letter last week. I only received it this morning. And there's quite a lot to go through. So I'm not sure if that's my fault or not. But yeah. So
which letter are you talking about? Sorry, Dennis, the letter was sent to you. It was mentioned at the end of the pension funds meeting. I checked it in Nkululeko. We had sent it to everybody shortly after. What time was it in Nkululeko? You sent it to all the committee. That was a letter from a whole, about 10, 12 organizations, most of which appeared before us. In Nkululeko, you sent it out to everybody. Am I right? That's
correct, Chairperson. After the meeting of Friday, I think so. Yes.
Yeah, so it was sent to you. Maybe something went wrong. But go ahead. We're making no final decisions, yeah? You got a sense from what Advocate Jenkins said, what they said. And they're largely covering the issues they covered already with a few new takes on them. I will respond later, but I'm wanting to hear what other members have to say. Right, go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, sure. So, Chair, look, I mean, it looks like there may have been an issue with the email address that was used for me on Friday, if it went out on Friday. But, you know, that's as may be. But he also confirms he hadn't seen the letter till this morning. But nonetheless, Chair, look, there are some issues around the fact that the, you know, the amount of changes that have happened between the A bill and the B bill and where we are now, it's had a dramatic impact on the content of the bill and the thrust of the bill. And you know, I do want to agree with some of the stakeholders and say I don't believe that these have been properly unpacked. Although, Chair, I must be honest and say that I think our process in the NCOP has been excellent compared to our normal processes. Not to say the normal ones are bad, but I mean, you really have allowed good, deep engagement and so on. So you know, and I think that must also be acknowledged. But you know, even so, I think that the depth of these amendments that were brought about at the end of the NA committee process. To unpack them in essentially 2 months and process them, I think has left some of the stakeholders a little bit behind the curve, probably. The fact that there's too much left to the regulations and probably too much power given to the minister, I mean, I certainly agree with that entirely. And I do think that we are setting ourselves up for a problem further down the road. Rushing the process, well, yeah, I do think that it has been quite a quick process, Chair, but having said that, we've had plenty of meetings and deep engagement. So on the one hand, giving people time to prepare their presentations may have been an issue, but I do think that we've had, as a committee, we've had a reasonably good process with lots of opportunity. And the fact that we're unpacking a letter now that came at the 13th hour almost is also useful. But I do buy into the fact that I think that not having enough time to prepare the comments ahead of the engagements, the public engagements, and certainly the ones in the province, Chair. Now, I do think that there's a difference between the NCOP's public participation process, which, by the way, has been done entirely on Zoom, and there hasn't really been a chance for an in-person engagement. But the provincial ones, some of those processes also, were kind of not handled as best as they could have been. Let's be polite and leave it at that. But yeah, Chair, I think that Frank's inputs today are well received. Again, I don't agree with all of them, but we'll deal with that in the wash, as they say. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wants to say anything?
I don't see any hand, Chairperson.
Okay, all right. In that case, let me just offer my own views, right, for now, and then, think it through. Much of what Advocate Jenkins says is familiar terrain to somebody like me who's been around for years. Now, my notes are all scattered and some of them are not there, but as I remember it, well, firstly, we will reply to them. We must. We are Parliament. We have to reply to them. There are many things I could say, but it'll take too long. Firstly, I don't know of any other committees that do what we do. Started in 1998 when we were in provincial and constitutional affairs. We did have what you call a conveyor belt system. I'm going into this at length because I think the civil society organizations writing to us are just not being fair. They write to those views, but they're not being fair. Let me give you an example. In 1998, we started this process. The committees have been involved. No other committees doing it, at least I don't know. We do this. You come for a public hearing. We say to you, can you please stay? So it's a dialogue. Now, you don't come with a conveyor belt system where each of you gets 10, 15 minutes. After an hour, you have a break, and then we question you, and then you get onto the first flight. Those days there were no Zoom, so only the elites came. You could fly back. We said, no, COSATU and business, stay. And we gave them space where we could to engage with each other after these submissions. Traditional leaders and feminist groups, stay. Conservative people who wanted secession, in the case of Afrikaner Volksstaat, and those who wanted a unitary state, let alone a federal state, stay. And we encouraged it. Then we said to the government department, now you reply to what they said. Then we bring these people in again from civil society. No other committee did that. I don't think anyone does it. And engages with them. You know the process, Frank. I don't know what's going on about Dennis. It's the same process we've adopted. From the beginning, you joined us in 2019. In 2014, as Dikeledi, I introduced this thing of Treasury reply. Mania suggested something about a budget. I said, yes, we do it for bills. Let's do it for budgets. We then asked them to come back after the public hearing. That was David Mania. It was just an addition to the process that we were doing. And it's been there since 1998. I've got a series of letters. I don't have them. Gender advocacy program and so on, where they said they never come across this degree of consultation. We even gave them the bill. Those days, because we had more time to process the municipal systems bill, we actually got different members of the committee to ring the stakeholders to inform them of what changes we made to the bill. And let me tell you, out of about 70 or so submissions, only about 3 people responded to the final version of the bill or even bothered to thank us. So let's be clear, this process is not new. It's unprecedented. I don't know many parliaments in the world that do it. Certainly, I challenge civil society stakeholders, show me which other committee does this. So what did we do? Well, firstly, we just put this on record. Firstly, we had public hearings like people normally do. Then we engaged with civil society in those meetings of the public hearings. Then we asked Treasury, you come back and reply to them. So we said, Treasury, you reply. Then we didn't speak. Dennis, we didn't speak like every other bill. We said, let civil society speak. And then it drags on. And then people get irritable. When are we going to speak? And then only do we speak. Okay? Then we did something further, which we're not obliged to do. We said to them, either you can go to NEDLAC or you can meet in Swane with Treasury and engage with them, all of you stakeholders. Even those who didn't come for oral submissions, I said to you in Kulileko, inform them they can also go there. So Treasury met from the 8th to the 10th. They came with a report. They presented what the other side, so to speak, said, and they said what they replied. Now, they made many concessions, Dennis, many concessions, actually more than I've ever had from Treasury before. But you see, there is a difference between when we said we're bringing to closure now the public hearing. We never ever said they cannot write to us. We never, in fact, last week I said, you are right, one of the stakeholders. In my summary somewhere, I said, until they see the text, and indeed we see the text, the committee, we don't know what change has been effected. And then they say to us, we don't know why we're not engaging with you, but we are engaging with civil society. That's what we did on 3 different occasions. Now, we're going to do it again in a letter. And we will receive comments from them once the aspects of the bill are ready. They say they don't know what our policies are. Of course they don't know, because we haven't made any decisions yet. The policies will emerge now. We are following the process we've followed since 1998 in my case, and in our case, collectively, 2019. Ask Dikeledi, 2014. The only addition is David Mania's proposal that even on the budget, they must first respond. And that's his introduction, your party member, one of the few valuable things he offered us. I'm going on at length because I think, in my view, I've never come across something like this. The tone of the public hearings of the civil society stakeholders is actually questionable. They speak to us almost bordering on, some of them at least, almost bordering on, what do you people know? We are the experts. Now, whether you're an unemployed vagrant who comes here to make a verbal submission, as happened on the municipal systems bill, or whether you're a professor of procurement law, you have the same rights in this country. We hear the merits and demerits of what you say. If you're an expert in that area, we take you more seriously, obviously. But we are not obliged to accept everything you say. Where does that come from? It seems almost like civil society in this case is bordering on wanting to co-govern. Well, part of civil society, those that are voluble and can write and so on, are basically saying, stop this bill, take it back. But there are parts of civil society that are saying, we want this bill. There's no monolithic civil society. There are different material, class, racial, and other interests at stake. Even when people are independent academics, they have unconscious and subconscious biases. So while they have every right to engage with us, they don't have the right to co-govern. They have the right to vote for who they want in a few weeks' time. And they can take into consideration how we've processed the bill in making that decision. That's what democracy is. Democracy also means that ultimately it's Parliament that decides. And we shouldn't be bullied by National Treasury, and we've never allowed ourselves, not in the committees that I've been involved in. Nor will we, on this first occasion in 29.5 years, have I come across this sort of insistence. I am told that some of these experts went to NEDLAC and said, here's our bill. Let's process this bill. Now, Willie, I want you to confirm the following things. By the way, Willie is under the weather. So I said to him, look, I appreciate you coming as well, our committee, but you don't have to speak as much as normal. So if MP speaks more, it's not there's a takeover there. It's just that Willie's not well. Willie, am I correct? I want you to answer later. That you had 6 months in NEDLAC with this process. Am I correct? I want you to answer that question later. Secondly, am I correct that this bill has been in germination for 10 years? Am I correct, third question, if you forget the question, that you gazetted the bill and stakeholders were allowed to comment? Have you, Willie, experienced this before, where you've been asked to go and meet with the stakeholders and tell us what there is? And whether you, as National Treasury stakeholders, agree, ultimately it's Parliament. These experts have to, it's Parliament that decides. So that the National Assembly has made changes, is their right. Often we're accused that the majority party in these committees is subordinate to the executive and doesn't change bills and sucks up to the executive. Now, when they make the changes that they do, which they are authorized to do by a majority, which is what democracy requires in a multi-party system, ultimately we take into account the interests and needs of the minority. We're a multi-party democracy. And where we are wrong, we have to accept it, as we have done in this committee. Now, for those of these people who are misunderstanding, Tandi and Dikeledi will confirm this. The chartered accountants came to us on the very day we were voting on the bill. Dikeledi, I wonder if you remember this. It was in one of the M ground floor buildings near the restaurant, one of the small rooms there. And they drew to our attention that there were two problems with the bill. Tandi Tobias, much more familiar with tax issues, immediately said, Chairperson, they're right. And we changed the bill. The Municipal Systems Bill was changed the day before. So what we're going to do here is no different. I don't know why they're asking for a textual representation of the changes National Treasury. Why? National Treasury has no mandate. They can't dictate to National Treasury. They have to win Parliament over. We haven't made a single decision. They can't draw any textual amendments. Frank, am I right? They can't until we mandate them, as we will start doing today, where we agree on some of the straightforward issues. So, yes to civil society participation, but no to co-governing. It's not going to happen. There are other means in democracy to express your dissatisfaction, as suggested. It's for us as Parliament to describe how prescriptive or otherwise we're going to be, taking into account that there are three spheres of government with the respective powers and functions, and the constitutional mandate within which we must operate, as must the executive, as must civil society. We will not do anything deliberately to undermine the powers of provincial and local government. From what I can see, National Treasury has softened it. Okay, and they're talking about consultation with FALGA and all, but we'll come to those concrete things. On the matter of regulations, I come from the background of legislative lawmaking from the time of the Municipal Systems Bill in 2000, where we told the minister, Bofamadi, hey, you can't regulate on all these things just like willy-nilly, even if you're going to say it within the framework. In those days, comrades, what used to happen is if the National Department found it didn't have favor with the committee on certain proposals, it'll say, okay, we'll prescribe on it. And then they'll prescribe exactly what we rejected, which actually wasn't within the terms of the bill or act as it then became. So we are going to look carefully at that, but they've already made concessions there. I think we've already communicated some things I don't understand about this letter, as if the people were not there. I don't know what point they're making. Some of them weren't there. Like we said, yes, they can do the textual thing and we'll show it to the civil society stakeholders. Yes, I think we did say we want to reduce ministerial powers. I think I've told Treasury that. And so on, I can go on. But let's be clear. We have already said, Kosatu said, within 6 months, the bill must be sent back to NEDLAC. We have already said that yes, we will consider that, edging towards saying, yes, we think that should be done. We have already acknowledged that there will invariably, from the left or the right of the political spectrum, constitutional or other court challenge. Some of these issues were related to genuine beliefs that the constitutional provisions have been transgressed or other legislative provisions. But some of it is just because people do not agree. Now, there are people who probably think we're rushing headlong with this bill because somehow the ANC is desperate to get this bill because we're hovering below 50% and we need it for the elections. Can we all get real here? For those of you in civil society who might think it or in this committee, given the ANC's many challenges, given the way the municipalities are collapsing, given load shedding and water shedding, given accusations of corruption. Okay, load shedding's been disposed of for what, 21 days, but who knows for how long. Given all these problems the ANC's got, does anybody really think if we pass this bill, the percentage vote for the ANC is going to shoot up? I mean, really. So on the matter of this bill being processed, we don't have the right, Dennis, in my view. We don't know what happened on the NA side. I know a bit because obviously I speak to people more than you do. You get a view from the party, I get it from, well, yes, from the party, but obviously. Now, what I'm saying is, if we do not want to proceed with a bill, that's fine by me. There is no obligation for the NCOP in terms of our norms and rules to pass any bill we're unhappy with. That there are so many changes is to be welcomed. That the civil society stakeholders don't agree with it is also to be welcomed. That's their right. That they have come here and they're still persisting. I see there's a letter from IRR later as it is been forwarded to you. I'm sure it's along the same lines. I couldn't understand. I just browsed through it. Something on misleading facts and so on. Well, give us the facts then. We will entertain it and so on. So I'll actually confer with Frank, but this time we're going to define the parameters within which people can make written submissions henceforth from civil society. You see, there are some of them, if not more of them than just some, who want to overhaul this bill, but it's been 10 years in the making. It's been in the NA for about 4 months or so. They've had from, I think, the day the NA voted early in December up till the time where our public hearings to prepare. Most of these people are sophisticated. Most of these people have the technical skills. I am not convinced that in this context, they're not faltering, underfunded NGOs. In this context, having been involved in NGOs, especially these in the NEDLAC process, that somehow the space given to them, I don't agree with you, Dennis, they had from early December when the bill was passed by the NA, right up till the time they appeared before us in the public hearings to prepare. And they also prepared during the 8th to 10th of April thing. I have never come across this, as I said, in my almost 30 years here, this tone and this attitude. We are not experts, neither constitutional nor other. We are simple members of parliament, as is the case all over the world. And there are experts out there no more. We take them seriously. I have been reading, stymied as I am by, my computer, and trying my best to cover up in reading. And I'll do much more reading when I can over the next few days. But at this stage, we can make no decision about whether we process this bill till the end or we don't. Let's see where we go is my suggestion. So let's start with this. The question to Willie, 3 questions to you, Willie. Can you answer them? Did you not process this bill for 6 months in NEDLAC? Did you not start this bill in 2014? And have you had this experience before where you asked to go and once a bill even is an NCOP, right? Parliament can make changes, Dennis. I'm not sure what the value of what you're saying is, Dennis. We're going to make changes and it'll go back to the NA and then they will decide. And in terms of the rules, if we have to have a mediation committee, so be it. But we're going to stick by the rules. I have no choice as a chair of this committee. But nowhere in the rules does it say was I co-governing. And mind you, the final thing I want to say is, you see, we have no plenaries. We're supposed to have plenaries of the NCOP. No one can say we planned our program a month ago and we planned that on a Tuesday afternoon, we are going to be out there in the campaign. Well, we can juggle times around, but we've got many, many sittings before a final decision is made by the 7th of May. However, as I understand it, between exchanges between Nkululeko, Frank, and me, we have to consider the negotiating mandates. We cannot question. We have no authority to. We're not some superior structure. We're a representative of the provinces as in a national sphere. So we can't tell the provinces, hey, go and do more public hearings and so on. They are here, these chairpersons. They must respond to that at some stage. They must put their hands up and respond to accusations that they didn't consult enough. And finally, do members of this committee believe that if we spent another 5 years on this bill, we're going to agree on the constitutional issues? That's for the courts to decide. We've said that. We are guided by legal services. Do members really think we're going to agree on the policy issues substantially enough? There is no give and take from these civil society organizations. They want what they want, and that's it. So they also have to learn to give and take, like we are doing in the processes unfolding now, and will continue until we decide finally whether we vote on this bill or not. Right, over to you, Willie. Answer those questions.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to you, and then also to honorable members. Thank you very much. I can confirm, Chair, the questions that you've posed. Yes, the bill was before NEDLEC for 6 months in 2022, between April and the 7th of October 2022. And we then produced a report which was signed by the leads of all the social partners. I signed that report, and then also signed by business and also by labor. And then we presented the report from NEDLEC to the relevant ministers, which is the Minister of Labor, as well as the Minister of Finance in October. I think we signed that report on the 25th of October 2022. So that's the first thing that I can confirm. And after, of course, a number of deliberations there at NEDLEC. Then the second question around, you are correct, Chair, Cabinet directed Treasury from 2014 to start with this process. So I can confirm that this process now has been under construction for 10 years, 2024 now. So that's correct. And then the other question around the Gazette, yes. After Cabinet granted approval for the publishing of the bill for public comments, then both Advocate Van Schoor and myself went to Cabinet in February of 2020, and then the bill subsequently was, of course, gazetted for public comments. But not only that, the bill was gazetted for public comments. I mean, there was a further extension to that gazette for public to make comments, and at least Treasury received comments in excess of 4,000 comments that, of course, had to be attended to, and then, of course, those comments culminated in the bill that, of course, was discussed at NEDLEC, as indicated earlier on, and of course, in other processes of government internally. I mean, leading to Cabinet again approving the bill for tabling to Parliament. I think it was specifically on the 10th of May 2023, and of course the Minister tabling the bill on the 30th of June 2023 in Parliament. So I think, Chair, this is what you wanted me to comment on. So it's accurate. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. I want to move on now because those were general comments. But before I do, excuse me, Frank, can you comment independently, obviously? And Advocate Jenkins is not servile to me. In any case, he wouldn't do it and I wouldn't allow it. What's the point of having an advocate who doesn't speak his mind? So, is there anything I've said that transgresses any norm of public participation or processing legislation in terms of the rules of this parliament, or undermines the constitution when it comes to the role of parliamentary committees and public participation in particular?
Chairperson, if I may, and I say it with respect, I would certainly I would advise you as soon as that happens, and it hasn't. I mean, I've been with this committee for a while, and in my view, this committee is always attempting to engage with the public right at the point where we go clause by clause on a bill. So public participation, in a word, is not an event. It is usually part of the whole system in this committee, Chair. But I will, if there is something that will come up, I will highlight it, Chairperson. That's my job. Thank you.
Now, colleagues, I want a mandate, so I'm asking you to give me a mandate to reply along the lines that Frank and I have done. Between Frank and I, we will draft a letter. And I don't have the time to draft anything today or tomorrow. So probably, tomorrow night I'll have some time. So, Frank, you can do a draft, just in the bullet or whatever. Let's deal outline. I'll do a draft along the lines spelled out here, but much briefer. And in Nkululeko, if you can you splice the whole period from the time we started to whatever minute it is now? What's the time? 11:04. If you can, speak to IT, splice that out, and I don't know, have a link or something so that we can write a short letter and refer them to the exchanges here. Secondly, the letter might not be agreed to by other parties. So we do not have to say that this is a letter of the committee as a whole. We will say the following parties disagree. So presumably the DA might and the Freedom Front will. We will get that letter to you. So we might ask the colleagues from civil society to give us an extra day or two if we can't get agreement. We'll look at any tracked comments you want to make on this thing. But I'd just like the ANC to comment. Do they have any views? Can we go ahead and do the letter or so on? Can any ANC member please respond?
Chair, can I?
Yes, please. Is that Linda?
Me and voice, Linda's voice, they sound the same.
Oh, Tikuleni, sorry. You got a slightly nasal. Anyway, sorry, Tikuleni. Yes, please speak.
Okay. No,
welcome back. I hope you're feeling better, yeah.
Soldiering on, I will say. Chair, good morning to you and the members. I think the mandate needs to be granted to you to draft that letter as presented by your good self. I think I don't see any problem in doing that.
Thanks, Tikuleni. Anybody else wants to say anything? Dennis, we'll send you the draft, Fanny. We'll send you the draft, right? You can look at it and comment. And as usual, we take into account what you say. But you might have fundamental issues with the bill. So can I clarify that? For one, is that we've taken no decision at this stage to finish the bill. Definitely. We'll see how things go. Two, is we have plenty of time. Three, is as we read, please, comrades, please, colleagues, read. Because I've really got a better feel now for the issues, having read yesterday quite a bit, and I shall continue to do so. We're taking no final decisions today, but there are some policy things that are so obvious, and I think we hinted at it last week, and those things we can adopt and ask them, because I don't think there's party political differences in those ones, certainly, but ask them to start adapting the bill and so on. Now, the letter will also include an invitation to them to continue to make submissions, and we will give them a time, not continue, but to give us, we'll give them the text of a bill, and they can comment on aspects of it that affect them. So if an aspect is done that affects, let's say, constitutional issues, we send that to them. and just hear what they have to say. It's the committee that will decide, but they'll send it to us and we'll forward it to Treasury, and they can send it to both of us simultaneously, and we'll look at it as we process the bill. But we must be clear, we're not obliged to do that. There's no obligation. It's our committees that do it. We're not obliged to. We do it because it's the correct thing to do politically. But there's no rule in Parliament. Am I right? Is there a rule in Parliament? Because I don't see where you must submit a bill again for consideration by civil society after they've been at all these public hearings to actually comment also on the text. Do we have to do that? Is that a compulsory thing, Frank? Because I don't know. Maybe it started happening to be compulsory with the new rules, but I don't know it to be a rule.
I don't know. What is necessary is we don't have the final text necessarily, but the amendments that are going to be made, specifically if it's substantive amendments, best that the public knows about that, and if it is a new thing that's not, how can I say, evolved from the public hearing. If the public hearing itself say, I want this, and that's fine. But if the committee, for instance, the department comes and says, we forgot about something, let's put something new in, we'll have to go back to the public.
And be familiar with that one, right? No, that's correct. We've done that before. But remember, it's going back, as you said, Frank, to the NA, right? So the process, if we finish here, doesn't end here either. It goes back there. Okay, and then it'll come back to us. Right, fine. Having said that, can we move on to looking at the issues around to what extent has there been economic empowerment and transformation? Treasury did a document. Will you, Willie, or MP take us through that? And then Poppy will come in. Now, I think that IRR letter, can you send it to committee members whenever it suits you? But I think after this meeting, because it came late, we can, if there's anything new in that letter that we haven't covered today, we'll obviously cover that. We'll write a generic letter and send it also to the IRR. Now, Willie, are you there?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, we were going to at least make an appeal to Chair on the specific topic that at least because the team at Treasury is still unpacking and breaking down the stats that were submitted with a view to presenting, to the committee properly, so that the statistics is understood in context. So the team is finalizing that process at Treasury, and they will send that report to the committee, and then the committee will, of course, instruct us when to come and present. So there is a clearer picture, given that the civil society has got a different view in terms of interpretation, their understanding, and so on. So if we can say it's an appeal, we're on our knees, Chair. We hardly do this. Thank you very much, Chair.
Any responses from members? I don't see any responses. Just to say, Willie, I understand, but you submitted this 3 weeks ago, okay? So surely you're familiar with what the issues are there. Now, are you saying that because of what stakeholders have since said, you need to rejig your presentation? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. At least
all right. Well, can we do it this week? Because you see, one of the foundations on which you decide on the value of this bill and the need for it is what is the situation, to the extent we can never know the full situation, right? Even when you talk of Black ownership of, if you like, the JSE companies, right? There are endless debates about what this percentage, starting from Thabo Mbeki's figure that was contested, right? That, well, the PIC is there and it mainly represents African people or Black people more generally. And therefore, they have much more substantial input into the JSE. Others say no, but that is like a pension fund. What about private-owned companies and all that? So we can have those fights. We'll never resolve them. What we want is an overall generic thing. right? A broad picture. You see, you're not going to alter a provision in this bill because the statistics, somebody says it's 30% and somebody else says it's 38%. That's not going to change a clause in the bill. What we want to know is, has there been sufficient transfer of economic power to African people and Black people more generally? That's what we want to know. So I don't want now an endless waiting on this thing. It's quite crucial. I know I only told you about it last night or this morning. Was it this morning? Because as I read through stuff and I was hamstrung by my computer, only late at night that I realized we have to, well, I put it on the agenda with Nkululeko, I think on Monday morning, or was it Friday afternoon? So it was there. So it's not exactly acceptable, Willie. You guys have to also wake up on your side. So we've got a meeting on Thursday at 2 o'clock. Can you be ready by then?
We'll try to be ready, Chair. Thank you so much.
No, you have to be ready. You have to be ready.
We will be ready.
Yep, good. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And then, Poppy, you will respond once they have come in. Okay? Okay, I'm going to now, colleagues, go along the process I suggested, which is to start looking at policy issues. And I think the best way to deal with it is to go through the narrative document, the one we sent you last night. Again, it was given to us last week, Monday. Dennis, you complained, rightly so, that it came very late, as I agreed with you. So now you had another 8 days to look at it. So that's the document we're going to go through. But before we do, we can just agree to some policy issues that I think there's no disagreement about. We can go through the document, right? And where we've already agreed on things, skip it, right? Dennis, I see your hand up.
Sorry, Chair, it was just some clarity on what you just mentioned.
Sure.
Are we then indicating that the meeting scheduled for tomorrow will not take place? Because I certainly can't attend that. And I know that a number of other people have indicated they're also not available to attend the meeting tomorrow afternoon.
All right, then we can change the meeting time. We can talk about it offline. But you'll recall that until yesterday, on Thursday, we were supposed to have a plenary in the afternoon. Yesterday, we got a notice. See, these things are beyond Nkululeko's control, please, members. Yesterday, we got a notice to say, no, it's 10 o'clock to 12:50. Are you aware of that, Dennis? It's Thursday morning.
Yes, I am, yes.
Yeah, normally you guys say, no, we can't meet because we're clashing with caucuses. Maybe there's no caucuses or the whips at the top obviously decided it was okay, right? So Thursday afternoon is 2 o'clock. Tomorrow, unfortunately, appropriations meets in the morning, right? So if we can't meet at 2 o'clock, can we talk offline of what time we can meet? Then the other option is, if we can't meet tomorrow, we can maybe meet on Friday. So basically, although I've got two election engagements, but I can juggle them around. So can I ask that we discuss that offline? We do not want to have meetings where, like the leader of the oppositionist party is not there if we can avoid it, right? And so can we talk offline, Dennis, just after
Sure,
this
no
meeting,
problem. Thanks, Chair.
and we can renegotiate. But you see, Thursday afternoon has opened up. And I only found this out yesterday, okay? And I told Nkululeko, well, in that case, why can't we use Thursday afternoon? So we have agreed in principle to avoid Fridays. But look, it's about ending now this whole parliamentary process. So, I think one Friday won't kill us. And now what we're doing, Dennis, because I can't think of any other way of dealing with it, is okay, let me put some of the issues to you and then you concretely say whether this process is fine, committee members. You see, there are some straightforward things. What I think is clear to all of us is that the whole bill cannot apply to Parliament because of the reasons spelled out. It's surprising that people who are very astute and understand the constitutional law suggested that, but it's their right to suggest it, right? Although I think this was raised in the NA, so I don't know why it was raised again, but maybe, never mind, they have a right to raise it again. Now, the issue is, who disagrees that we can't do that? We have our own Financial Management of Parliaments Act, and the co-chair is sitting right with us now, Comrade Mashlang Dikeledi, right? Now, I think what we say would be a reasonable way out is we're not going to do that because it undermines the theory of the separation of powers. I think Frank said that also last week. So what we can say, however, is to the extent we like this bill, is to just note this, right? The first of things, and Nkululeko and Poppy also note this, so that the report covers the things that we agree on. What we can say is that in our report to say that the seventh term of Parliament should review the Financial Management of Parliament Act to take into account what is relevant in this bill here, will be an act hopefully by then, to Parliament. So we're not prescribing, we're not making any changes, but we're suggesting it. Maybe Dikuledi as the co-chair wants to say something. Is there a crime in putting that in the report? It's not binding, it's a suggestion to the seventh Parliament. Dikuledi, do you want to say anything as the chair of that committee? Is Dikuledi here? And we lost her.
It is, yeah, Chair.
Oh, I think she's cut off.
I am here. I'm here.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
here, Chair. I'm just struggling to
Struggling with
unmute.
network, yeah.
Yeah. I think, Chairperson, what you're suggesting is something that I can bounce with the leadership of the committee and see how we can recommend it. I think there's no harm in recommending something as progressive as you're suggesting to improve the functioning and the impact that the committee, the Joint Committee on Financial Management of Parliament can do. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah. Good. Nothing wrong with that. Because if you're not prescribing, we say they must consider. There may be nothing relevant to Parliament. So on that one, the theory of separation of powers, colleagues, there's nothing we can do about it, and we agree with it. So is there any objection to that one? So that policy issue is dealt with immediately. No. Now, the other one that I think, oh God, I put all of this last night, but open it is a nightmare. I'm sorry about this, really. It's just beyond my control. I put 4 issues that I thought, okay, can I talk about something that's come from the stakeholders, and I think we will agree with, right? This is if we finish the bill before the deadlines, right? So can't we say in the report, Esther, Poppy, and Nkululeko, please note, and here's nothing controversial, is to say that we appreciate or understand that there are challenges around this bill. We can word it appropriately. We can collectively find the words offline. We highlight the following issues raised. And then we can highlight some of the key issues raised by stakeholders that for various reasons, practical and other, mostly other, we cannot process. So we say these issues still have to be addressed, and we see this bill as the first phase. Frank, you might help us, first phase of a transitional bill, and suggest that within 18 months, the bill be reviewed, including through consideration by NEDLAC. Now, is that sort of broad thing agreeable to members? Can you comment?
As chair, yeah, it just seems to be panel beating the process to put the cart before the horse. But yeah, to include that, and I think that it's important to note what Advocate Jenkins said earlier on about the fact that clauses don't have to all be implemented simultaneously. So
no, funny, you sort of like you just anticipated what I'm about to say. But carry on. So we're on the same page there.
Yeah, because we think, Jay, but yeah. So yeah, I think that it might be preemptive, but I mean, it might, as I say, be putting the cart before the horse. But it might be a solution. I don't know. We'd have to chew on it a little bit.
Yeah. It only can be done, obviously. And I did say it. if we finish this bill, which is still like, unclear, let's see where we go. I mean, there might be something insurmountable, and we say to everybody, hey, we can't process this bill. So, I don't agree with you about the cart before the horse, but I anticipated. I didn't know what you'd say, but that you'll say something like, no, it's not that. It's not that at all in my thinking anyway. We've done this before, my friend, where we said this bill is still, and it had nothing to do with any elections coming up or any pressure. Because any side, we did it, where we said, we do not believe there's an implementation program, okay? And we think that this bill will be difficult to implement. So we said, phase in, it started with the municipal systems, which you're familiar with. We put all that, Parliament, we completely rewrote that bill as we did the municipal structures bill. We said, no. You bring all those regulations to us, you give us 30 working days, right? And if we haven't come back to you as Parliament, go ahead and do it, right? So, and we said, phase things in, you can't do all of this. But obviously we couldn't prescribe. So the minister had to regulate which parts of the municipal systems bill. And I looked at the bill yesterday properly, reading it line by line. Well, I didn't finish everything, but I can tell you it's there. I saw it. And an advocate from, I think, the MK veterans raised it, and then Willie pointed out it was there. So that's very good. But linked to that are other issues that I think we can agree on now for Esther to start considering putting in a report. You see, does anybody buy this thing of Treasury, that this bill has no financial implications? Anybody buy that? Let's see.
No, clearly not, Chair. I mean, there's whole departments that are going to need to be seen.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? Hey, Willie, MP, we don't agree. Okay. So we're going to say in our report that it is a matter of considerable concern that the bill has not been costed. And then we'll put all the stuff we've written before about how departments operate, Willie. It's been done. You guys never listen, right? Guys in the collective sense, in the triple sense. You know what? No, nobody buys that, Willie. You see, you're right to tell civil society, hey, we can't do a concrete analysis of exactly, nobody can do that, right? Not even in Switzerland and Sweden and all these very progressive parliaments of the past, right? Nobody can do it, okay? Not the US Parliament also, with all their 14 staff members. How my blood boils. 14 staff members when we went there. And that was 12, 15 years ago. Each congressperson has got 14 staff members, apart from a budget to extract external technical opinions. So we're agreeing that we don't buy it, Willie. We want you to change that memorandum, although that's a meaningless thing, as a memorandum is not legally binding. But don't come like that, Willie. Yeah, you keep saying things that are not credible, really. Okay? You say things like, like a clever official. We've heard this so many times before. No, it won't cost much more, you see, because, they already got these structures and people and so on. You made some concessions that regard, we look at it concretely, but we don't buy that, okay? So we're going to be tough on that one. We also, I think, are saying, from what I can put together, that we think you have serious capacity issues, both at Treasury level and at the level of provincial and local government. So, are we going to put in a paragraph already, start structuring our ideas so that it provides a framework within which we see whether we can finish this bill, that we are concerned about Treasury's capacity and indeed the capacity of provinces and municipalities to implement this bill. And that we think within 6 weeks, 8 weeks maybe, to give of the convening of Parliament's committees, constituting of Parliament's committees, I think, Frank, a report has to be given on progress on the bill, on the act as it might be then, and on its implementation program. Anyone have a problem with that general proposal? No. Now, colleagues, we'll go through it concretely. But I've heard Advocate Jenkins, and my own feeling is that we might have to tweak the bill here and there, but overall, the bill does not undermine the powers of provincial and local government from what I can see. I could be wrong. I'm not an expert constitutionally, but I chaired local government here for what, 6 years? And I served as a deputy minister for 4 years, and I engaged with really top dog lawyers, as it were, both as a member of this parliament's committees and on the executive. And the powers and functions across the three spheres, I've been fortunate and privileged to have been in that space. And I'm a big believer in local government powers and functions mainly. Provinces I'm less strong on being interfered with unduly. But Dennis, we've had this view. We are where we are. The municipalities are faltering. National and provincial have to come more to the aid as a system of cooperative government, sort of undermining them. So on that one, I just don't buy it. And I think Frank's saying there's nothing there. On the related issue of how prescriptive and how discretionary it should be, there, Treasury seems to have made some concessions. There we must have that debate, right? And we can only do it once we concretely look at the issues, starting from now, and then when we look at the actual bill. There, members, I would suggest we keep our minds open. It is the right, as Advocate Jenkins says, for national parliament to provide the norms and standards and the national framework. That's correct. We don't have to apologize for that. But we cannot do it in a way that undermines the powers and functions of the Constitution. So on that one, I'm alerting you. This is all coming in my head because I don't know where my notes are. If you try to open the thing, it gets a revolving thing. Those of you in MacBook know. What's it called? I don't know if Salia told me what it is. Then the next issue, colleagues, we're going to look at it concretely now, is the Public Procurement Office being in National Treasury. I looked carefully at what the stakeholders said. I heard them. But colleagues, unless somebody can come up with an argument, I'm tentatively suggesting, Esther, I hope you're noting in Kululeko all the decisions that we've taken and other decisions that the chair has thrown out for consideration, which is the last one is not a decision, it's for asking members to be alert to powers and functions and to discretion and prescription. Then the thing about the Public Procurement Office, Treasury is explained. Let's go through that. My own inclination to say, think about it, colleagues. There's nothing wrong with it being in there. We can tighten its independence and all that, but it should be there. I can't understand why we have to take it out, but you think about it. It's not a decision in Kululeko, when you note it. It's actually an issue for members to think about. But a decision is now required on whether we have this constitutional debate and discussion between the stakeholders and civil society. Now, on this one, I already suggested last week, and having heard Advocate Jenkins today, I'm even more convinced, and I'm putting it to the committee. Please comment on this so we can close it or keep it open. It seems to me, given the complex constitutional issues around which National Treasury, its legal advisors from outside, the state law advisor, the legal services unit representative here, and the stakeholders disagree. I don't think we, as non-legal experts, though we have an obligation to ensure any bill we pass is legally sound, I don't think we can come to a conclusion on that. And people have a right to go to the courts, as they will anyway. Let the courts decide. So we should put something in the report that says that here's all these state-linked legal experts saying it's constitutional, and many academics and other experts from civil society are saying it's not, and the committee feels it doesn't have the expertise. It has tried as best as it can, and finally it did what a committee always does, which is take advice from independent sources externally or the legal services unit. And the legal services unit has been very consistent that the bill is constitutional. Ultimately, all these experts, so to speak, from our side, state, that's parliament and government, could be wrong, and civil society could be right. Only the courts can decide that. So it seems to me, unless Frank has got the time and space and feels the need, it doesn't seem like it, there is no need for any further discussion about constitutional debates, except when we start crafting and looking at specific clauses. We can look at whether it's constitutional or not, guided by Frank. Any question about that approach? No? So let's continue then with the process, right? So I suggest we turn to, is there any other issue colleagues can remember that last week we agreed to that we need now to decide on? I think those were the issues. I can open my documents, but it takes very long. You know, it keeps revolving. So I'll try. But as long as I don't type anything in, I can use, hopefully, the narrative framework, a narrative report of Treasury, and they're going to help us to go through it. And that's the report that is on the written text, not the slides, on the exchanges there between the 8th and the 10th. Okay, so can we all get to that document? It was sent again to you last night. I have to find mine quickly, and let's hope it doesn't take 1 year. Ah, it worked immediately now. Oh, it's very erratic. Okay, here we are. So if you turn to the first page, it simply tells you that those were the organizations. You go to 1.3, and they rightly say 1.6, I think, comments by the stakeholders about the processing of the bill by Parliament and its committees fall outside their role. They're right. Okay, now let's go to the first one. It's JSR. They were quite formidable. There is lots of questions. And right, can you quickly remind the committee? I've had the privilege of reading this thing. Can you remind the committee about this issue of them saying you're undermining the Constitution in this bill that you brought here because you're not drawing the distinction between develop and they wanted to add regulations made in terms. Similarly, Clause 8 and 12 proposed to be amended to provide policy developments by procuring institutions required. Yes, what is the issue here? It's under joint strategic resource and then their proposed amendments. Can you take us through that, please? Develop and implement are the issues. I thought you do. Yeah, sorry, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
If I may, just in brief, I think they raise the issue because the bill refers to implement a preferential policy by a procuring institution in Chapter 4. And they also raise this in relation to what I call the general procurement policy. What would be the role of the procuring institution? Is it clear who exactly has the authority to, I'm going to use the word, determine a procurement policy, including a preferential procurement policy? So the proposed amendment is what Treasury made there at the bottom, is to address this, that we insert in the text that there's the responsibility to develop and implement the preferential procurement policy. And then that we also add, because the other concern that was raised, that it must be clear that they can't simply do a policy without complying, well, firstly with the chapter, which is already stated in the bill, but they must also comply with the regulations that the minister will issue pertaining to Chapter 4. And then in the same vein, in relation to the general procurement policy, which is linked to Clause 8 and 25, that we also make it clear in those provisions that the role of the procuring office institution is to develop and implement that policies in accordance with the Act and the regulations. So that's our response to the concern they raised by the bill currently simply only talking about implementing the policy. Thank you, Chair.
That's making sense to me. In my notes here, I've got agree unless I don't see things here. What's the problem with what they said? You don't have a problem, right? National Treasury.
Yes, no, we agree. Actually, that's why we proposed that amendment.
Yeah.
Yes,
But I'm tempted to ask, why didn't you see this yourself in the NA side? But that's a rhetorical question, right? Because I have to say, frankly, although civil society is a bit off the mark, as I said, to put it in a nutshell, you're also off the mark. I mean, if you look at this bill, right? I mean, you wonder, how could it have been that so many things you didn't pick up over the 10 years you've been working on this bill? It's a fair thing to ask you as well. All right, fine. I think I agree with it. I don't know what others are saying. So the other members want to comment? Frank, can you help us with this? I think this meets the needs of JSR.
Yes, Chair, I think so. I think it clarifies that specific point that they raised. And it's a point of
point. Yeah, it's a good point. Okay. Now, ultimately, it doesn't matter, okay? We are Parliament, we are taking decisions, but it does matter in this sense that we would like to know how people see this. And obviously, they want to see the text. But for now, is GSR happy with this, or they want more than what you offered? Willie, MP?
Chair, not as far as I can recall, because this was our response in the meeting. I don't know. I just want maybe Willie can come in, because I had to leave that particular meeting. I couldn't attend the entire meeting.
No, they were here last week as well, and they came back. I can't remember exactly. I mean, I can't open all my notes. But surely they would have said they were very upset about, one of their allies raising their issues too, or whatever, that their demands were not met. But from what I can see, having gone through this carefully last night, you have met that thing. But now, are they unhappy, or they didn't say anything about this last week, Willie? In Tuesday, when was it? I can't remember which day last week we met on this bill. Willie?
Yeah. No, thank you, Chair. No, look, I think despite the fact that we had made a proposal for the inclusion of the term develop in clause 16, they still had some misgivings, at least from what I read subsequent to our report that we presented to the committee, Chair.
What were the misgivings?
Yeah, they still don't believe that the term in itself, cures that mischief of the.
What word are they suggesting? In other words,
no, there is no word suggested, which is
all right. For now, we can't see anything here that doesn't meet that need, right? When we send the bill or this section of the bill to them, they can comment. They're not going to dictate to us any more than you are, Treasury. As we said, you can agree at your meetings, but ultimately we decide, okay? You're going to have consensus, but we can say, we don't agree, okay? But mostly we will take that into account. Like NEDLAC is very crucial. And we are the first committee, I think, that referred a tax bill to NEDLAC for the record, right? We said, no, take this bill back. I think it was the VAT bill, and there was another bill, sugar beverages tax, I think. I think we were the first committees to do that. Treasury said, no, you can't take a tax bill to NEDLAC and so on. We said, no, do it, and so on. So, fine. In other words, they can come back and they can comment and we will look at it then, right? Right. That this workshop could possibly, the workshop issue we've settled, right? We don't agree, we're moving on. On the matter of NEDLAC, section C, yes, we agree, but not now. It'll happen within 2 years once you get a review of the bill. Yes, we are. They say JSR suggested that this proposal be included in NT's report. You did do that to give it NT's view. You can't have a proposal on that when the bill is in Parliament, right? You're right. Your response was correct. So let's go to 3. Now this is about They want explicit inclusion of the constitutional principles in the bill itself. As previously noted, the inclusion of these principles could, among others, be done by inserting a purposive interpretation clause, an example of which is proposed, I think, here. An example of such a clause is proposed. I think you got that. And your response is, the principles of Section 2171 should not be defined in the primary legislation, as the principles will be contextualized when the system is prescribed. Many of the concepts used in the proposed clause in our submissions will result in interpretation disputes, right? Okay, can we pause there? Because I want to raise something that I forgot. Look, we have colleagues here from the provinces, right, in Kululeko. And I'm not so sure whether we should detain them in looking clause by clause unless they can afford to stay. We are more interested in them understanding where the process is in Parliament and where things are going, and reminding the two provinces, if they're not here, you will do that by letter, that the date for negotiating mandates is next week. But between negotiating mandates and final mandates, we will have plenty of time to process the bill and alert the provinces to where we've come to. Right. Having said that, is there any provincial representative of a committee of the legislature who wants to speak? In Kululeko, I don't see any hands up. Do you?
No, there are no hands, Chairperson.
Okay, so if they want to speak, obviously they'll raise their hands and you'll draw it to my attention. Now, MP, can you explain this one to the committee?
Yes, Chairperson. So the principles they're referring to is the ones in 2171, which is equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective. Oh, sorry, I missed out the fair one. So they proposed an interpretation clause, which we didn't quote now in the in our report. Sorry, in that third line of the response was referring to their submission. Now, in our view, firstly, those terms are not defined in the Constitution, and in our view, it should be given effect to the provisions in the bill itself and the regulations that will determine the procurement system to be implemented or developed and implemented by procuring institutions. When we looked at that particular clause, we think it will result in many interpretation disputes. That was our view.
Frank, what do you think?
Chairperson, as I said in my presentation, I think the principles will be applied by a court. As far as I'm reading court judgments, whenever there's a challenge to a procurement exercise, rather than, let's say, the act as a whole or the regulations, that is where the court starts, and to see whether your policy complies with that, and of course whether the act complies with. So they are there, Chair. I would also argue, but this is a content issue, that to give each of those principles some kind of better context or a specific meaning is going to restrict them, and it's going to restrict the interpretations going forward. And as I said, I do not think the fact that those principles are not clearly put into the bill, and to say this is what this one is, and this is how we give effect to this principle, doesn't make the bill unconstitutional. And that might be a issue for going forward, Chair. And I know in the letter it said that that is standard in other developed countries' procurement legislation, that these principles are elaborated upon in the empowering statutes. Chair, that is exactly what it is, but I don't think it's necessary, and I can't see how we going to start dealing with that. Obviously, Chair, if we do that, when we bring in issues of cost effectiveness, the whole issue of price comes back in. And I think, and I've only read part of that report of the task team, which said that the issue of price has been used to actually prevent the achievement of the specific objectives of the preferential procurement, Chairperson. That's why the set-asides have now also come in, and I think that was also the intention to bring the set-asides in the regulations of 2017, which were then found to be unconstitutional because the Empowering Act didn't allow that. So, Chair, I think it's not necessary, and it might be I mean, if I had my own view on this, I would say leave them in the Constitution. That's where we want the principles, and we want the framework in the Act, and we want the policy in the department or constitutional institution, Chairperson. Thank you.
Okay, members, Dennis, please come in here.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Now, I think that the issue of price and premium has been raised and re-raised and discussed and so on. And you know, I want to, you know, I want to say Advocate Jenkins's inputs kind of presuppose that this thing is definitely going to end up in the courts, and the way it's going, it certainly will. And I think partly it's our job to try and prevent that. And to find some sort of a mechanism to ensure that we limit the scope for court challenges to happen by presenting a bill that's really acceptable to everyone. And I think that the two things that South Africans really want are efficiency and value for money. Now, one can't discount the requirements of I've lost the blooming paragraph. Sorry, I had it in front of me, and then Frank said something that took me to a different chapter in the Constitution. But section 2, subsection 2 of that relevant clause, what is it, 170? Sorry, Chair, bear with me a second.
No, I don't feel under any pressure. We're all battling. I don't know what your issues are, age, but my issue is computer.
Yeah, and I think this is part of it. I mean, if you could have a look at my desk, there's bits of paper spread all over the thing.
I are using paper when me, the old man here, is using a computer. Never mind that it troubles me. Okay.
I can scribble notes on paper, and I don't get that irritating little circle spinning on the screen. So
yeah, how right you are. How maddening it is.
The problem, though, is that whenever you're looking for a piece of paper, it's in your other office, and I think this
I know.
Working remotely. Anyway, Chair, I've got it now in front of me. It's section 2172, and the overemphasis on 2172 has been raised consistently, and the fact that we can't throw out 2171 with the bathwater, as it were. So I think that one of the key things is that we need to find middle ground, and I do believe that the bill as it sits before us now doesn't really offer middle ground. It's overemphasizing 2172 without paying any care to 2171, and I think that's pretty much what civil society has pointed out. It's what my party certainly has been banging on about, and I think there are other parties as well that have raised this issue. And I don't believe that Treasury's changes or proposed changes have gone far enough to find a middle ground where we find that premium needs to be limited. So paying a premium above price is perhaps something that most governments will do in order to achieve broader ideological outcomes. But the reality is it needs to be limited. There needs to be a handbrake. And I mean, one only needs to look at the paying 70 Rand for a bottle of water through SIA at one stage. And these issues where really there's absolutely no test that deals with value for money. And I do think that Treasury really needs to come to the party on this and say, gouging is fine, but don't gouge too much. No, I mean, that's not acceptable. But, there needs to be some sort of a limit and always a reference back to price. Price and value for money have to be part of the procurement process, and we had excellent inputs to that effect during the process. And if only we could have had that unpacked further, where people spoke about the international tests, the international procurement protocols, etc. and you know, just measuring ourselves against that, there would be huge value, in my view, to measuring ourselves against, you know, kind of international benchmarks, where we sit in terms of, because I mean, there's a matrix, and I can't remember what it's called, but there is a matrix where different countries' procurement systems, you know, are measured, and they take into account, and they make allowance for the fact that there might be a need to you know, place premiums on certain purchases and so on. But yeah, I just think that excluding the requirements of value for money entirely out of the system, and you know, there's lip service paid to it, but I don't believe that there's sufficient effort that's been put into building a balance into the current bill that we have it here. So that's my biggest concern that I have. I mean, you know, you all know I also have issues around the constitutionality and the shift of powers and functions across the spheres. But my biggest issue is around this this value for money being almost discarded.
Are you done? Dennis, are you there?
Yes, I'm done. Thanks, Jay, for now.
Okay. Yeah. There's plenty of days ahead as well. Anybody else will say? Okay, can I just say a few things, right, Dennis? I couldn't work out what you were saying that's relevant to this particular issue before us, and what is a more general comment on the bill as a whole, not finding middle ground, right? And your concern about premium versus price and so on. So firstly, as far as your general comments go, I don't think anybody disagrees with you. Who in their right minds wants to agree in this committee that people pay 70 rands for a bottle of water? It's horrendous. It's shocking, okay? Secondly, and we can't allow it. Secondly, you are right, as I've repeatedly said. I don't think Advocate Jenkins is suggesting that we should reduce the scope, as you put it, of potential challenges to this bill. I think he's trying to say what I think I'm saying. No, not I know I'm saying, that whatever we do, it's going to be, I think, taken to court by some other party, even if it's just one. That's the anticipation. But it doesn't mean, and he's obviously a lawyer, he can't allow it. I mean, it's going to reflect on him as well, not just the committee, if we do things that are obviously unconstitutional. Who ultimately is accountable? The Legal Services Unit to a committee. But on the matter of price, COSATU also raised it, right? As I understand it, they have softened it. Willie, can you respond to all these things? Because I think you have to have price. I also think, Dennis, yeah, it's partly ideological. In my view, it's mostly practical. If we do not transform this economy, Dennis, all of us are going to be swept aside. All of us, including the ANC and all parties. When that tipping point is reached, as you know, especially in developing societies, there's no turning back. So we need to transform the economy. The thing is that the ANC leadership itself has acknowledged that it's the politically connected elites that have disproportionately benefited, as I have repeatedly said. So to look at, well, 20% has been handed over to African or Black ownership. Which 20%? How representative? Triple P and double E hasn't really worked to the extent. It itself has acknowledged that. Okay. So we agree with the general points you're making, Dennis. And I think Treasury has gone some way towards the middle ground. And I think it's our job to see that we steer them more in that direction. But we can't have a bill like this, Dennis, members, that sort of accommodates everybody. We can seek to do that, but in a give and take fashion, because we accommodate military veterans and, you know, the Black business lobby was fed up of this bill and thinks it's too conservative. And then you sort of like, you know, look at established business and their anger. You're not going to be able to have a bill that's agreed to by everybody. You'll have to find some middle ground, as you said. So, Dennis, on this matter of this particular issue, The way I see it, I agree with Frank, but the thing that struck me also is that it's better to steer away from giving meanings to terms you don't have to that are in the Constitution. Because tomorrow, Dennis, there'll be another bill before another committee, and they'll use these same terms and give it another meaning, not necessarily the one that's here. And that might override, because it came later, what we have here. I do not fully understand. Can we come back to that question, really? Why is it that they want these things explicitly in inclusion of the Constitution? Haven't you said it there in different forms, in the aims of the bill and so on? Can you come back on that? Why are they so insistent? I saw a hand up. Who was that? Oh, it was a lowering. Dennis, is that you? Do you want to say something before Willie comes in, and Frank, if he wants to?
Yeah, Chair, perhaps just a response. And I mean, I don't want to necessarily have a dialogue, but I think that what you said actually opens up the nub of the opposition to the bill as a whole. And now we're getting away from what we're discussing here, and we're getting into more general things. But
right, fine. We got there because of you, but let's continue. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So as you've said, the benefit of the economic reforms that has been felt to date has largely gone to a select few, and it hasn't been broad-based. I believe that the bill before us is further entrenching that same reality. And the fact is that in order for government to achieve a reinvention of the economy, the best thing that it can do is to run government efficiently and well. In other words, and I think this is part of the studies that have been circulated with for this meeting, is the fact that, you know, the enforcement of race-based policy, the enforcement of black economic empowerment and so on, has a history of failure. And the reality is, if we could only intervene by running government efficiently and properly, that would be the solution that would help us. Because if we were running an education system that had excellent outcomes, you know, that would then benefit people and enable them to empower themselves. That's government doing its job in order to empower the citizens. So I realize that there needs to be some sort of a step change, that you know, we can't just leave it for education over 3 generations to resolve our issues. There needs to be other interventions as well. But the reality is that as long as we are, you know, spending 5 million rand erecting a prefab classroom, you know, we're going to find ourselves in the same issues. We should rather be spending 5 million rand on training teachers and getting enough teachers in classrooms and focusing on that. So I do believe that this bill and the opposition to this bill is largely around the fact that it is attacking the problem from the wrong side, that it is merely further entrenching the same problems that have not worked to date. And I mean, you know, the ANC has spoken about the triple challenge, as far as I can tell, for 16 years in exactly that terminology, the triple challenge. Before that, I mean, it goes all the way back to the Freedom Charter, that poverty, inequality, and unemployment are issued as 3 of the key challenges facing the country. And these have gotten worse in the last 30 years, not better. Not one of those measures has improved in 30 years. So the point is, what we're doing is not necessarily working. Now, this bill just doubles down on exactly what has brought us to where we are now, instead of trying to attack things from a different perspective. So firmly, Jay, I believe that government should govern well. That's its first job. And trying to influence the market, when the market is so much bigger than just government, trying to manipulate the market is going to be ineffective. Sorry, Chair, that's my soapbox moment for the day.
You're entitled to it, Dennis. The issues before us are all complex. Myself too, I'm finding it quite challenging. Do anybody else want to respond to what Dennis says? Does anybody else want to respond? Are there any hands up? I don't see any. Okay, so for now, my response is, look, it's, you see, firstly, what you see, don't apologize for what you say. And it doesn't matter to me, given the set of issues before us, whether you raise general issues on a specific matter or vice versa, and where you bring it in. So, you know, any member, you or anybody else, it's not like an overly structured process. It'll become that if we get closer and closer to clarity, right? So, firstly, at the heart of what you say are major, not policy differences, but ideological differences, more than just policy differences, right? Which is crime. This is what a multi-party democracy is about. It'll be very boring if we had a one-party, multi-party democracy, right? In other words, if the ANC got 99%, I mean, really, they came close to that. What is it, 90-some-odd percent? Some of us were dismayed. We thought it's gone too far. But that's me and my tradition within the ANC. But the majority, of course, wouldn't agree with me. So, although Madiba did say something very similar, as some of you might recall, you know, he was so, you know, charming and engaging. He's much more the person he appears in public, even in inside structures. So there's nothing to hide. I won't say exactly where, but he said somewhere, we've done too well. And it's good, he said, that the Western Cape has been won by your party, or was it the National Party at the time, right? And that, you know, KwaZulu-Natal, almost like a textbook settlement, right? And some suspect Kriegler engineered it, but there's no evidence of that. Okay, so it is what it is, right? That we came to have this election result. And it's partly contributed to our complacency. But you see, where you are right, Dennis. See, firstly, where we won't agree, the ANC, it's not just me. Never mind that others are not speaking. I'm giving you the ANC line, right? And I'm supposed to chair, but I see that comrades are sort of cautious about saying things. But here we are. You see, you're right about this, that you can't solve the issues confronting us with this bill alone. And no one is suggesting that. Two, you are right about government efficiencies. If that improved governance across all three spheres, many of these issues will be better dealt with through existing programs, policies, and legislative prescripts, okay? You're right. And I see no harm in the committee, if the majority agrees, right? Speaking now as a chair, I don't know what the ANC will say, that Esther draft something along the lines that Dennis has said. So we are clear. And I was going to edge towards saying something like that, but not in the way you're saying it, which is this bill in and of itself will not solve the issues. They could replicate some of them unless blah, 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 the efficiencies, fairness, etc. On the issue of price, I don't think we can ignore that. And I think Treasury's made a concession. So when we get to price there, but you are free, Dennis, as you are free with anything else, to come with a proposal on where we deal with price without that becoming unduly influential on outcomes. Because emerging companies can't match the prices that established companies do. We need to find a system that allows price to be a major consideration, but recognizing the historical advantage, not just of white people, but of Black people too. If you look at Black powerful people, they continue to dominate the market, partly because of their strength in the economy. And in KZN, it's disproportionately Indian South Africans, as was often argued. Others argue that it's not true, right? So I don't know what the ultimate thing is, but visibly and observably, that's partly true what people say. The domination of Indians in KZN of the political economy doesn't justify racial attacks on them and so on, but that's the truth. I mean, that's what you see. Anybody who comes to eThekwini, and Dusi, just look at what goes on here. It's still white dominated, but of the people of color, it's Indians that are substantially even beneficiaries of BBBEE. So, Dennis, you can even help craft that paragraph about this in and of itself won't solve the issues. Also, just alert us in writing. I'm not sure how much we'll use, but we will note what the DA is saying. We'll say the DA's observations are the following, as is allowed in terms of a report. So what I'm saying, Dennis, is that some of the general points you make, even the ANC leadership agrees to, right? The NEC has discussed this thing. Ministers have discussed it. They've said, look, things are not working, right? They switched from double BEE to triple BEE. Hasn't succeeded to the extent. The ANC keeps admitting it. The facts will show it too. They won't show the class interest within the African and Black communities, limited as that class delineation is. It's there. So we agree that, and we should say it in our report, our deep concern. And Treasury must tell us, and maybe Willie must come in now, because we've gone to this general point, okay? So let's just deal with the specific point first, right? The specific point, I agree with Frank and I agree with Treasury. And I agree we don't have to give an interpretation of it. But I would like the committee to be given the clause they gave you, because it doesn't seem to appear the actual clause where they propose that develop and implement in and of themselves don't sort it. So can you send us just that clause so that the whole committee can look at it? Now, to come back to the general point, Willie, I think arising from what he's saying, on the issue of price, we'll be coming there, but just give us a general response. What have you done to make changes to take that into account? 2, what provisions are there here? And don't tell me everything's going to be in regulations, because we must put a clause in that says the minister must regulate to ensure there's not the same emerging companies that benefit all the time. So tell us what you're doing about that. Tell us also what you care. What are the clauses that you have? You've done it in a part, it's there, I read it, but since we were discussing, people haven't got necessarily all of them, the report, the provinces don't. What are you doing to ensure that we don't pay 70 rands for a bottle of water? What are you doing to ensure that there's no corruption? What are you doing to ensure, in other words, as Dennis suggests, the same elite won't be the main beneficiaries? Over to you, Treasury. But before you do, Frank, do you want to come in and comment on Dennis's point of view that you've gone too far down the road of this thing's going to court anyway? You have a right to reply if you want to. I have replied on your behalf, but I'm not your spokesperson. Frank?
Yeah, no, Chair, I do want to reply. I mean, I don't want to be taken to assume that this is going to court. I mean, as I understand my role in any event, it's part of a risk management issue. The advice myself and members of my office will give committees is exactly to avoid legislation ending up in litigation, Chair. So we try to look at it from that angle. We don't assume that it will. But sometimes the fact that someone can take it to court is not something you can prevent. Whether it will succeed is a different thing. But I don't certainly don't envisage that or even wish it. It costs a lot of money and time and takes away valuable human resources in our office that will have to deal with this legislation and the litigation on it. So that's not what I'm trying to do and to say I assume that it will. In fact, it's quite the opposite, Chair, where I'm trying to explain that certain of the constitutional concerns are not, in my view, from the court cases that I've read, supposed to be constitutional concerns. And perhaps certain of the stakeholders will look at that and say, well, fair enough. We tried our best and our policy issues didn't find traction or something, but we're not going to court around it because we've heard what was going on. So I'm just trying to contribute to that whole discussion, Chairperson. Certainly, I mean, we mentioned the separation of powers. when Parliament leaves gaps, and this is just sort of a economical, political economical equation, when Parliament leaves gaps in constitutionality, the courts will fill it. So our job in legal service is to make sure Parliament fulfill its role completely and do not leave those gaps, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I think it's good you replied. Dennis, do you want to say anything in response?
No, I'm happy with it. I like the reply. And
yeah. And you know, Frank, he's very diligent, eh? And you don't know just how diligent, eh? Because you ring him on a Sunday, he'll answer. Not that I harass him on a Sunday, but now and then I have to. So, you know, I must say I've experienced him, Dick Lady has since 2014. And we're so lucky to have him in the 4 finance families, right? Dennis, just to explain, legal services units not available to allocate, you know, their limited staff to committees in the way we fought for Frank to be allocated to us. Okay, so I think we're all grateful for what you do, Frank. We don't always agree with you. And you've also sorted me out even offline where I've gone, you know, out of place, so to speak, which of course is very rare, but Dennis won't agree, but that's fine. But you see, there's another point, Willie, you have to respond to. We've forgotten. I don't know why Fanny's keeping quiet there. Fanny asked at the outset, okay, how long is this thing going to continue for? Obviously, they don't buy this, what they call race-based. I think the day is the same, right? So we're never going to agree on this bill. But the question he asks is, for how long will BBBEE continue? Implying, if he hasn't said it, I can't recall what he said exactly, hey, you know what? This can't continue forever. That he's right about. But, you know, what forever means is debatable, right? So, Willie, can you reply to all these issues raised by Dennis and by Fanny and by Frank and whatever you want around these general issues? I know they're general, but it'll help us to move faster when we go down this report.
Chair, sorry, Willie, do you want to
Thank you,
start?
Chair. I'm sure
Okay.
the advocate will respond. I'll also come in and respond to some of the other issues. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, you all decide who, yeah.
Okay, Chief, firstly on some of the provisions that deals with matters relating to 2171, obviously there's a reference to it in the preamble and also in the objects clause, and specifically it says the objects referred to in subsection 1, that's in 2.2, must among others ensure efficient, effective and economic use of public resources, which is the wording from 195 of the Constitution, and then it adds through amongst others the assessment of the cost, benefits and risk. Then just on the measures for you know, charging absorbent prices and so on, there is provisions regarding the barment, and it's specifically dealing with price fixing. That would be a basis to debar a service provider. And then there's also offences relating to corruption and so on. That's later on in the bill. Then on the proposal regarding price, we in the report that we gave last week that you mentioned, we did mention a proposal to amend clause 25, and that's a section that provides that the minister must determine a framework for the procuring system that institutions must implement. And we're proposing a clause which read along the following line, which is not, we will submit it to the committee together with a clause on develop and implement, which reads the criteria for evaluation, which may include where applicable price, experience, reliability, and professional and managerial competence of the supplier or contractor and of the personnel involved in providing the services. So it's a long clause, functional characteristics of goods and environmental characteristics. So this would be a requirement that the minister must prescribe this, and this would now, where applicable, also deal with the issue of price. Just briefly on the sunset clause, one could put the sunset clause in the legislation, for instance, in relation to aspects of preferential procurement. But the other way to do is simply to, at the stage, if Parliament doesn't want to do that now, is that obviously the legislation can be reviewed at the time when it seems appropriate to adjust the preferential procurement provisions. Or the sunset clause, if in the bill, it could have a trigger like a notice in the Gazette and maybe subject to consultation or Parliament's approval, that the sunset clause be implemented. Thank you.
Okay, Willie, do you want to come in?
Well, thank you, Chair. No, I just also wanted to respond to the issue. I think the advocate responded to the other issues. Firstly, to respond to the issue of what are we doing to make sure that at least not the same culprits, benefit out of this system. I think the stakeholders submitted, of course, over and above what already exists in terms of a beneficial ownership, because that's why you're going to pick it up, to say who are actually the ultimate owners of some of these companies. So that particular principle, of course, is now also part of what has been submitted by the stakeholders, and which we've agreed to sit to make sure at least you manage that particular process, so that not the same people benefit out of the system. That's why. And then also, Chair, in clause 13 of the bill, where we're talking about at least specific people that are automatically excluded from participating in or from submitting bids to government. So that's another provision that we're making, other than just other provisions that we're making in terms of the chapter 3 and so on, that relate to even issues of fraud. Because for us, if a government department is charged 70 rand by a supplier, and the department accepts that, then to us this is fraud, this is corruption, and there are definitely provisions here to deal with those issues as contained in chapter 3 of the bill. It's very important for us to do so. We can't allow people to just accept the prices. It's definitely a form of corruption, Chair, and there are ample grounds here on which to act. And there's also a provision for offenses, to say what kind of action should be taken against those that collude to fleece the state. And the offenses covered in the bill, I think it's in clause. Just for me, check. Just want to get to that clause. I bet you want to know clause. Yeah, but there's a clause that deals with the offenses. Around issues that relate to non-compliance with the act. So that's another. Now, if I may just also comment, Chair, briefly. I know this has been covered greatly by Advocate Jenkins, yourself, Chair, as well as Advocate Van Spoor.
Cover it again. It's all helping us to get to clarity. We've got plenty of time, my friend.
Yeah.
The complex bill. So you speak as much as you need to.
That's right. This is around what the civil society is proposing for us to define the principles of 2171. Those 5 principles that are contained in there, to say, we must say, what does equity mean? What does fairness mean?
I don't understand, really. Why do they want that? It's very puzzling. Yeah.
And they want this in the bill, and I don't think it's feasible to include those things, because this particular approach is subject to interpretation by different people. And I think the advocate was quite right to say, once you include that, you are locking yourself up. Because if it's included in the bill, and someone else comes up with a different interpretation, his own or her own interpretation, then that becomes a problem going forward, because then you are simply limited to that part. So that's the first part. But the second part to that issue, which I picked up in the proposed definition, is the fact that what is being proposed conflates 2171 and 2172 in their proposal, and that's a problem, because 2172, the standalone, because it talks about transformation, if I may just use that word loosely, Chair, whereas the 2171 talks about general principles of what procurement should be. And so that's another part that I think would be problematic for us. But again, just to go on, Chair, and talk about this issue of maybe it's maybe an assumption that the bill in its entirety is much more biased towards chapter 4, or let me call the preferential chapter, which of course is a function of the Constitution. And we don't believe so, because chapter 4 is just one chapter among 7 chapters of the bill that go beyond just the issues that relate to preferential treatment of the historical disadvantage. So it goes beyond that. I think it's very important that we also raise this issue, Chair. The issue around price and value for money, I think in our presentation over and over, we're going to say in our presentation, we did indicate that, I mean, we took a broader view to just price and value for money by at least including section 195 1B of the Constitution, which we believe is broader in the sense that it relates to efficient economic and effective use of resources of the state of Ghana. That's what we say. Hence, we were saying, if you look at one of the pillars of this bill, we're saying the bill, of course, is premised on 195, 216, and 217 of the Constitution. I mean, 217 with all its subsection, and in 195 as well. So we believe that when one talks about value for money and price, that is of course included in 195. You know, above the fact that in clause 25, as Advocate Van Schoor indicated, what we are proposing, at least to cover that issue around price. But Chair, I must also indicate that during the scope process, we had presented the issue around price to say, I mean, if you were to issue tenders, one of the critical elements should be priced. There should be a price. And stakeholders came back and vigorously so, stakeholders including the academics that we're referring to, and saying, look, Treasury is bringing price. In fact, price is discredited around the world. I'm paraphrasing, but that statement could always be verified, Chair. Is discredited around the world as a mechanism to evaluate tenders. We were referring specifically around here when we're talking about chapter 4. And then we had to go back again. And of course, the committee members also raising this issue sharply to say, no, you can't then use price, because what ends up happening is that price turns out to take the bigger chunk of a tender. And from people that you know, entering, let me say, new entrants and SMMEs who also would want to come in into the procurement system, then somehow unintentionally get excluded from the process, because if the weight is much more on price, and then they are out, then the entire you know, government contracts would favor big business, and that's an issue that we're talking about price. But at least we did make mention of the issue around price in clause 25 now on what we've said. Now regarding the location of who then determines a preferential procurement, I think we've debated on this issue this morning, and also what we are proposing. And of course, the committee would eventually take a decision on that matter around the insertion of the word develop in clause 16, just to cover that part. Because what we should bear in mind is that in in the development of procurement policies by government institutions, right? But they should do so within a system, and that's what we're saying. There should be a system within which they develop their policies, so that there is no confusion out there. So what then the bill says? The bill sets a framework. In other words, a framework for the system that would be prescribed by the minister, and therefore the procuring institutions also complying with that system. So I think, Chair, I must maybe leave it here, at least for now, and then take it back to you, Chair. If there are any other comments, I'm sure Advocate Van Score will also add to this one. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks for that, Willie. Actually, you are much more helpful than you suggested in your initial reservation about speaking. It's very good what you've been saying. I have one or two questions, though, but before I do, let me ask members if they have anything to say in response to what Impie and you said on price and value and the other related issues of how you're dealing with corruption and avoiding the same people, benefiting. Comments from others? Dennis, yes.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I disagree quite strongly, but I mean, I think we need to maybe, and specifically, you know, I mentioned the fact that price is not the only factor, and value for money is probably a far better measure, and I used the phrase several times. And that value for money includes capability to do the work. So there's no point in employing a fellow that meets all of our pricing criteria, et cetera, but can't actually get the job done, because then there's no value for money. You know, and also if someone is offering to do training, upskilling, local content, et cetera, and looks like you'll be able to do it, you know, that gives value for money, which moves away from price. So I do, you know, we can't be oversimplistic in putting ourselves in little boxes and saying, you know, price is discredited as a factor. It's not. You know, price is one of the key issues, but it's not the be all and end all. But that's why I said earlier on that there specifically needs to be good balance built into the procurement system. And the fact is that you know, it looks like some of this will be dealt with in the regulations, but again, the absence of regulations, or even draft regulations, or even a kind of an indication what those regulations might start looking like, is part of what's making many people feel uneasy. And I mean, I realize that regulations follow legislation. That's it. But the over-reliance on regulations in terms of the wording of this bill is, I think, where a lot of us are feeling a little uncomfortable at this stage. So, yeah, I think, Mr. Matabula, thank you for your inputs. Again, disagree on stuff, but noted. Thanks for the debate.
Fani, do you want to comment on the response to your question?
Honorable Chair, thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the responses that was given. Obviously, I do not agree with what was said. I believe that of race, a lot of people are suffering in the country. So if you look at that, everyone needs assistance, and we need fair and equal opportunities and treatment. And the BEE and affirmative action legislation must be scrapped as a whole, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, that is the position of your party, as enunciated by your leader. And I think it's in your electoral platform, right? It's part of your thing, so we understand. Okay, so Willie and MP, firstly on the issues of develop and implement, I can't see why we need to come back to that. We agree with your approach, okay? I can't see why I need to come back out of the circles for us to have in this bill an interpretation of those terms. So no, I don't think anybody, maybe Dennis or somebody agrees you should put that in. But you see, what I'm not sure about is why do they want it fully, right? So how will it assist, I can't work out, right? And what they've said, and I'll read more, is not clear to me. So on the issue of a price and value for money, now, from very different ideological vantage points, quite opposed in some respects, right? That Dennis and I have, as sometimes happen, I think there are some things we can agree on. So you see, I think he's right about the term value for money. I think he's right about what he's saying about price. And you are right to say price has been used to exclude people. And that's right too. But to use his term, can't we find a middle ground? For example, on that clause 25, I don't think you need to put price as something to be regulated. COSATU also raised this. COSATU is not a liberal party, right? I think one or two others who are progressives, they're not linked to any sort of particular interest except their own intellectual and academic interests. But you see, as long as you put price, I mean, we've reached a stage where we're so good at crafting bills, right, compared to the earlier period, where we've learned so much over 29 and a half years. Why can't you craft a clause that takes into account price and value, not just price, but the ability to deliver, as one or two of several criteria? It's not the preponderant criteria, and it should not be used, I don't know how you put that in law, should not be used to exclude African people, because that's what it's mostly used for. But you see, there are a litany of stories. Even the peasants in Outer Mongolia know it, right? About how abused the system has been. He's using this example of 70 rounds, bottle of water, and so on, right? Now, you're an MP saying, I think, we have all these preventative measures. We'll debar them, we'll define them as fraud, we'll let them to the courts. The courts. Okay? Yeah, courts. What do you think is going to happen? So, you see, you're talking about punitive measures, subsequent measures. Can we do something in the bill? If we can't, then the minister must regulate. And we must put some deadlines for these regulations. You see, if you can convince us that you can't put price as clearly as one of criteria to prevent also while you put that down. See, if I'm not a legislative drafter, so I would say price and value for money are among 7 or 8 several considerations in deciding on the awarding of tenders, full stop. Now, you can't write a bill like this. Where do you ever see a bill like this? However, price and value should not be used as the sole criteria. Then we have done nothing. So that's what I'm saying. Is it not possible to craft a clause? The NA might dismiss it, that's their right. But we are the NCOP, and we have the right, having listened again to stakeholders so many times, even via you and your reports. I don't see why we can't do that, Willie. Can you explain to me, MP, why we can't put it in more explicitly, but ensure that it's not used to exclude people, right? Then can't we put in more preventative measures on dealing with corruption, right? On the matter of putting like a sunset clause, that is the view of Fani. I don't know that the majority will agree to, because we can't. How will we do that? In the report, we can say, in a measured way, that obviously in the long term, as the economy becomes transformed and is reasonably, you can't say if there are 72% African people, 72% of the economy must be owned by Africans. You can't have that sort of crude proportion. Economies don't function like that. Growth will never happen, okay? So you'll say reasonably representative of the population groups, something like that. We can say that, Fani. That's the most you might get. But we're not suggesting the sunset clause in P. No one has suggested it apart from Fani. But that we need to, in the long term, incrementally exit from some of the things we're doing through BBBE is a reasonable suggestion. We don't know how long. It could take 40 years or 50 years. Partly depends, or it could take 10 years. It partly depends on to what extent the established businesses, both black and white, particularly white, obviously, are prepared to open spaces for their African colleagues. Now, the next point to say is that, do you want to respond to this, Willie, MP? Why can't you put a proper clause? Why can't we do more and prevent what I just said, which is excluding African people from entry?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Let me also just come in. I'm going to ask Chair that the Advocate Pascal reread again the amendment that
I was looking
proposing
for it earlier, while she was speaking,
that we're proposing on clause 25.
I saw it last night, but I've forgotten exactly what it says.
She can just reread that and see, and I mean, also from a drafting perspective, what the Chair is proposing, I think would be led by her and Tim, the lawyers here, to say, how can you craft it to deal with that issue that the Chair has responded to.
That's on page 4, right? The regulations will detail the new chapter 4. Then under that, there's this thing of using 25.1, right? That's the one I saw. But to me, it's not clear enough. Okay, go for it, MP. Colleagues, turn to page 4 of the document. And if you go down, under Procurement Reform Working Group, point number one, under Procurement Working Reform Group on page 4. Okay. MP, over to you.
Chairperson, sorry, we in this document we didn't fully explain the clause. What I read from is what we actually drafted on the site, but it would read that the minister must, in the framework, prescribe criteria for evaluation, which may include, where applicable, price, experience, reliability, and professional and managerial competence of the supplier or contractor, and of the personnel involved in providing the goods and services, functional characteristics of goods and environmental characteristics. I can maybe also put it in a chat line if it would assist.
No, people have got this thing. We sent it to them last night. You can do so. That's your thing. Right. Anyone say, you want to add anything, Willie? No. Okay. Dennis, can you come in on this, because you feel very strongly, as do we, but right. So Dennis,
so I think it would be useful to have that in the chat, please. I've also just put something in the chat now, and perhaps also a demonstrable ability to fulfill contractual requirements from the contractor's side might be something to be included there. But if I can see that clause, because I mean, as with all of these things, one needs to look at it, think it through, and then work out where the pros and cons are.
Come back now. Okay, she'll give you the clause as she'll give all of us. Right. So can I ask any member wants to come in here? This is quite a big issue. Okay. Right, she's put it on the chat group there. On the chat line or whatever it's called. Can I just say, so, and Frank, help us, right? So let's say we don't want it in regulations, we want it in the bill. The things you just said, and we can see to what extent we can accommodate this, right? What would be the problem, Willie, MP, to put it in the bill? It's not regulated. The minister can regulate certain things, but there's some things the bill has to have in its text as compulsory. And you say may as applicable and so on. I don't know what that means. It's too qualified and too loose.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to allow at least Advocate on that one.
Okay, fine.
To speak, but also, Chair, maybe before I take off, also on the issues that you proposed, some that also need to look at the preventative measures rather than the punitive measures. Something else. Maybe Advocate can also comment on from a drafting perspective.
We're not going to bind. Good point, Willie. You're being very helpful, very helpful. You're like almost co-chairing here and giving direction. Very good. That's fine. You see, Impe, we're not holding you by it that you must give us a fully crafted thing in your head. Obviously, you can't do that. But an overall thrust of what you might be able to do. And then what I suggest you start doing is crafting those things. Okay. But colleagues, I don't know how we're going to do that unless we actually look at the bill side by side. So let me think through a process and I'll come back to you. But in the meanwhile, you can start drafting parts of the amendments to the bill, of the sections around which we've given you considerable guidance. Ultimate decisions were made once we see a text, right? Okay, over to you, MP.
Chairperson, you will look at the wording of the clause. Obviously, there's instances where functionality and experience, for example, won't be applicable. But I understand it's the introductory say where applicable, so that we must make sure that the where applicable doesn't apply to all the concepts used in the proposal.
Yes.
So we understand
that. Yeah.
And then we will look at to the extent whether it could be a substantive clause in the bill. Is this currently the way it sits under the procurement system to be prescribed? But we will consider that and make a proposal. As the preventative measures, I think one of the important ones that's already in the bills in various provisions is transparency. And there we will have to rely on civil society to help us as a measure. But yeah, I can't think of any other preventative measures now in addition to what's in the bill. But we'll consider that and come back to the committee.
Okay, Esther, just note those things, please. And can you send me some notes each day about things that we've agreed on, things we've said we'll think through, and things we're saying, okay, come back to us on this, like this one. Okay, that's fine for now. Then, unless anybody else has got... Fanny, do you want to come in? Fanny? No. EFF, Moletsane. Simon, why haven't you said the word Moletsane? Are you around? Is Simon around?
Yes, Chair, he is, yeah.
Oh, he doesn't want to say anything. All right, we can't force anybody. But, I mean, normally he does participate. Okay, so EFF's position... Simon, can I just ask you? You're not obliged to do this, right? But broadly speaking, what's the EFF position on this bill? Did you vote for or against it in the NA? Do you know, Simon? Oh, I don't know if Simon's connected or lost. Willie, did the EFF vote for or against it? The bill on the NA side?
Yeah, if I recall, Chair, the final word from the EFF was no, we don't support it. And I'm sure my colleagues who were there on that day can also maybe correct me if I'm wrong. Advocate Vasco, you and I were there. At least we attended that meeting, the very last one. Except Chair, for some critical issues that the EFF, had been raising during SCOF. One of the issues is the very one that we're talking about now, around the value for money and around price. I think the EFF was quite vocal on that issue to say this issue should never find expression in the bill because it is used. We are true experience as a barrier to entry. So that's an issue. And to that effect, we've always said, look, value for money and transformation. And I mean, these are not mutually exclusive. That has been our position at the time. But to answer you directly, Chair, that's what I understood them to be saying. Well, there are other, unless we deal with those issues, there are other issues that they've raised. One was the capacity of the state, so that you don't end up outsourcing everything. So then they wanted at least us to have a clause to that effect, and with the help of Advocate Jenkins, we put something in the preamble that deals with the issues of capacity of the state to undertake certain services internally. But over and above that, at least what the EFF wanted was to say list those services in the bill that you're gonna you of course do as a state and not outsource. And we couldn't do that list because again you'd be locking yourself up, and we didn't do a thorough research on exactly what those services are. So that's one part. So we did accommodate the capacity of the state in the preamble. And then we also, after deliberations, of course, and the EFF being supported by the civil society, the academics, to say price is discredited. So we had to go back again at the direction of SCOF to relook at those issues. But again, now what we're hearing, at least from the NCOP process, is that maybe that's something we'll look at. Hence, we've made that proposed amendment in clause 25 to deal with that issue. Thank you, Chair.
MP, do you want to say anything?
Chair, sorry, I can't recall whether the EFF voted or whether they supported the bill or not. I'll have to check on the order paper for the NA. But as Willie
No,
indicated...
it's fine. Frank, can you remember?
Hi,
Frank?
Chair. It's written in their report that EFF and DA reserve their position.
Yeah, but reserve their position for the report. But then in the committee, in the House, they have to either vote for, against, or abstain. You're dealing with the report. They always do that. But then they have a position, because in the House, there's no such thing as reserved your position. So I don't know. Frank seems to have been lost. Frank, do you recall if they voted for it or you don't know?
I don't know, Chair. Sorry, I don't recall.
Okay, but I think their take would have been if they didn't vote. Somebody says he has called Sean Scott. I don't know who that is. Probably a civil society stakeholder, or maybe he's an official. I don't know. But he says something here in the chat, which I couldn't quite follow. I thought it was for. They, Honorable Maimane, was very active in making recommendations. I may be wrong listening to Willie. Okay, it doesn't matter, Sean Scott. So it doesn't matter to us particularly, but it's interesting to know what their problems were. I would imagine they objected to it not going far enough, right? Maybe one of the reasons, and that may be why they didn't vote for it. But that's fine. Simon will take the position his party has, and that's sorted. And now, can we move on? Sorry, Dennis?
I've just had a quick look through Hansard at the speech delivered during the debate, and actually Nkululeko is 100% correct. In the speech delivered in the House, it says that the EFF will pick up these matters in the National Council of Provinces. Until then, the EFF reserves its position. So it appears they may have abstained, Chair, but without the actual record of proceedings, then I wouldn't be able to say clearly. But that's what Hansard says is in the speech.
Yeah, that's in the speech, but you either vote for or against or abstain. So presumably they abstained. Okay, that's what it means, if that was effected in the actual voting process. Doesn't matter. I just want to know what their arguments are. That's more important. All right, I get it, what you've said, that they felt price is a waste of time and all of that. And I think they probably, I don't know, speculating. Right, fine. So having said all of that, is there anything else you want to say before we move on to the next issue? And we're about to get to 1 o'clock. Let's see in the next 9 minutes what we can get done. Okay, so we finished with develop and implement, right? So
I've just put a comment in the chat. So a quick counter proposal is at short notice.
Right.
I highlight the fact that the phrase cost effective comes straight out of 2171 of the Constitution. So I think that might be kind of a minimum to include in that redrafting.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I've tried to underline it. Unfortunately, with the Zoom chat, it just underlined the whole paragraph. But yeah.
Fine. All you have to do is submit it in writing in the next 24 hours, and we will look at it, right? Okay. So the next issue then is, where are we, MP? Go back to your documents.
It's on
page
paragraph, page 3, page 4, paragraph 4.
Page 3, page 4.
It's
you
at
see,
the
there's
bottom.
no page. It doesn't reflect page numbers here because
it's
the
at the
whole thing.
bottom, page 3.
Oh.
36.
Yeah, what I'm saying is there's no page numbers. This thing is functioning in a crude way. Okay, so just give me the title. I can see the bill is before Seekoff, and what page is that? It doesn't give you page numbers. The whole thing's gone wonky. So the bill is before
Okay, it's on the
Seekoff.
screen
you're
now.
there. Okay, right,
Yeah.
second. Yeah. Okay, yeah, now I get it. Okay, so it says you intended reintroduction of the word develop in section 8.1 of the bill. Now, can you take us through this, please, MP? It'll be quicker. What are you saying and what's your response? We've covered most of this, what I can see. Many of these issues, but go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I think you're correct. It's related to the earlier question about us currently in all the bills saying only implement. So we're now proposing develop to the provision on developing the policy, which they say what this might raise concerns about as to what is the role of the procuring institution vis-a-vis those of the minister and the public procurement office.
Yeah, that's right. No, yeah.
Which I don't, in terms of the minister, obviously the minister determines the regulations, but there's no role of the public procurement office directly in relation to the procurement system or the policies.
You explain that. Yeah, that's right.
So that's, sorry, on the wrong page. And I'm concerned that we will end up with the same problem that we had with the triple PFA, with the court in respect to the 2017 regulations. Now, our response is that the legislative scheme that you find in this bill is quite different from the one in the triple PFA. And it's much more detailed as to the kind of matters that the minister may prescribe, where the triple PFA was very limited. It had the minister prescribing formula for the point systems, and then also there was the necessary and expedient provision that we relied on to make the 2017 regulations, which was found to be unconstitutional. But in the case of this bill, it's not correct. We're relying on, it would be, if the regulations are to be made, will be specific powers given to the minister and not relying to general provisions. And then we also make it quite clear in the bill, which I think it's not, well, in my view, not the case in the triple PFA, that when they determine these policies, procuring institutions, they will be bound by what's in the Act and in the regulations. So we don't think there's the same risk that if it goes to court, it will be found unconstitutional on a similar basis. So that's our response to this.
Any comments from anybody? Responses? Okay, Frank, do you want to say anything in this regard? Frank?
Chairperson, I'm here. Sorry. No, I agree. I agree with Advocate van Schoor on this one. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't see what she's saying. It doesn't gel with me. I mean, sometimes I'm a bit surprised at why they're raising this, given that they're very familiar with legislative issues and constitutional issues and so on. I also want to add that, yes, while the developed countries offer us a framework within which we should, not framework, but offer us sort of a guide, because they've gone further on these issues, they're not South Africa. They don't have the specific challenges we have. They don't have the looming crisis that we have, which will be basically racialized confrontation, never mind the class issues. So they don't have the historical and cultural experience we have in this country. So they can offer us, as indeed they do on other bills, some issues to draw upon and adapt for our conditions. But ultimately, there's a sense in which some of these civil society stakeholders seem to think that we need to literally adopt what they say in the developed world, though we often do that when it comes to multilateral conventions and so on, and their decisions and policies. But, it's not always relevant to us. That's all I'm saying, a general point. Now, can we stop here? And so please remember, in Kululeko, we're on paragraph 5 on that page, okay? Okay. Then can we look into the possibility of meeting at 5 to 8 p.m. tomorrow, but I will discuss it and we'll put it up on other. But we're certainly going to meet at 2 o'clock on Thursday. And then will the DA and FF, Freedom Front and EFF think about Friday for either the afternoon, even if it's 2 hours, or the morning. Okay. That said, can I thank everybody, not least National Treasury, for your assistance and cooperation in this process. You can start drafting where we've agreed. The report writers on our side need to send us like notes every day from our bullet points and say, okay, these are the things we agreed on, these issues, no decisions taken, and these we want Treasury to come back to us on. Having said that, is there anything anybody wants to say about process issues? Nope. Shall we move on? Thank you very much. See you tomorrow, hopefully at 5.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Mhm.